I want to welcome you to the Retro Rogues Live. Please pay attention to our warning graphic. It states the Retro Rogues Live show is intended for an adult audience and not intended for children under the age of 13. Parental discretion is advised. I want to welcome you here to the show. My name is Dave Beatty. For nearly the last 30 years, I've been a professional illustrator and graphic designer. Worked on a lot of fun things that people have heard of. I'm going to focus on creator-owned things tonight. I've done a lot of interesting creator-owned series I'm very proud of. One of those, the very first one, was actually a series called Star Gods, which we'll be talking about a little bit later here in the opening segment. But in addition to that, I also did a series called Bushi Tales, and of course my ongoing series, which I'm currently doing, called Red Skirts, which you can actually find on the internet, and you can actually read that for free if you would like, because it is a free web comic. In addition, also having a print version. But enough about that. I want to welcome back my co-host. This is Mr. Eric Alexander. Eric, please tell the folks hopefully watching or listening at home some of the fun things that you have done as a creative professional.
Hello, everybody. Yes, I am Eric Alexander, also known as Bass God 14. That's Bass God 14, not Bass God 14. Bass God 14, like a bass guitar. And I am the co-host of Retro Rogues Live. I'm also the chief financial officer of Bad Bob Productions. We're currently working on some new content right now. In fact, I actually spoke to my partner yesterday, and we actually are working on our proof of concept trailer for the Walk of Karma. So speaking of original projects. And then, of course, I am the associate producer of the feature film Occupants, which features Star Trek Voyager actor Robert Picardo, and is currently streaming for free on Tubi.
Very cool. I actually didn't get to tell Eric, but I'm actually working on a film project currently at the moment too, which is very interesting. Had someone reach out to me about something, and I said, well, that sounds interesting, so I'm working on it. Can't say anything about it just yet. Hopefully here pretty soon I'll be able to talk about it. But again, enough about that. We're getting off topic. So here at the top of the show, I want to talk about the Retro Rogues fanzine. I said last episode I was hoping it would be ready and available, and it is now. You can actually download it actually off of the website right now. I want to preview it here real quick, if you all don't mind. I've been talking about some of the things that are inside the magazine, but we haven't really shown a whole lot. So this is obviously the cover. Everyone's kind of seen that. Lists some of the different items that are in the magazine itself, or the fanzine. But this is the title page. I think we did show this last episode. You just kind of saw it briefly, though. But you can see it a lot better here. Has in here what the contents is. This is our feature story with PJ from Orville Nation. This is an artist spotlight with artist Ben Glendenning. Continues here to this page. This is a pinup of the Golden Age Batman and Robin that I did. This little teaser for our Comics Greatest World that'll be coming to the Retro Rogues podcast very, very soon. I'm still working on that, but it should be debuting soon. This is a favorite comics from yesteryear. This is a little segment here on Funko Pops that's in there. I'm talking about, of course, the classic X-Men, and I talk a lot about some of my early experiences with them. There's a couple of the cartoons that are in there, one submitted by my mom, Jane, who sometimes watches and participates in the show, and the Janimal, who used to be or still is sort of the on-again, off-again co-host of the Retro Retrospective. We do have episodes still in the pipeline that I need to finish. This is the feature on Moon Knight Rising with the art that James Stone and I did together. If you're interested in Moon Knight, there's a lot of interesting information. And then I actually have for you here, in my personal opinion, these are the most important. These are the key issues for Moon Knight, and I talk a little bit about why. There's a great article that Ed Harris wrote about why you should be buying original comic book art.
I should mention about Moon Knight, Dave, that remember that there is an upcoming Disney Plus show for that, and I think that was part of the reason for doing the Moon Knight. There's a lot of people like myself, because we've talked about that know nothing about Moon Knight. So this would be a good way to catch up on the character in anticipation for the show.
And these are kind of the key. Like I recommend that you actually check out the essentials if you can get a hold of them, because sometimes you can get those relatively inexpensive, and they have a lot of great material in them. But if you can't run those down, I actually break down, in my opinion, the most important and crucial issues of Moon Knight have been published, in my personal opinion. And it breaks all of these down here, and there's a lot of information there about those. But yes, because of the Disney Plus series is why we were talking about it. But this is a very interesting article, actually, that Ed Harris wrote about collecting comic book art.
And Ed has been on the show. It's important to mention that Ed has been on the show.
And right here, this is our totally brand new story just for the magazine. I don't want to dwell on it too much, but you can read that. And then the next issue, I'm planning a deep dive retrospective like what we did for Moon Knight, but I'm going to be focusing on Miracle Man. So that'll be coming up. So,
but Dave, I don't have my issue. How do I get one?
Well, funny you should bring that up. We're going to walk you through the steps here in case anyone is not 100% certain how this works. So what you want to do is you want to go to the Retro Rogues website. You can either get there by going to www.davebeatty.com or you can go www.retrorogues.com. This is the first page that it takes you to. It has episodes on it, but what you want to do is at the very top of the website, there's a little menu up there and it says Retro Rogues Live. The next one says Latest News. If you click on the one that says Latest News, it'll actually load the blog page. And on the blog page, the very first thing that comes up is the Retro Rogues Fanzine Issue 1. So if you click on the headline there that turns blue, that's the link. You click on that, it takes you to the story or the article about the Retro Rogues fanzine. And if you just scroll down, it's very, very simple. There's a little bit about it. And then right there, that little link right there, if you click on that, it will automatically download it to your website. Doesn't cost you anything, doesn't do anything weird. There's nothing strange going on with it. It's just a straight PDF. It doesn't have any kind of security or anything on it. So if you want to take it and email it to friends, or if you want to email them a link and say, hey, check this out, I think this is fun, we want you to be able to do that. This is something for all of us to share. This is for all of us who are celebrating our fandom. That is the point of the Retro Rogues fanzine. Again, this is issue 1. We're going to do 4 this year and see how it goes. So this is the first one. So basically we're going to go quarterly. So roughly about every 3 months, give or take, we're going to have a new issue that comes out. So this is the very, very first one. So we hope that you'll go and you'll download it and you'll read it and hopefully you will enjoy it. And then it'll be fun to come back to the show. And again, please share with your friends. Please share with family, anyone you think that might be interested in this. Please tell them about it. You can email them the PDF directly if you want. It's about 5 megs, so it doesn't take up a lot of space. And please, let's share it. Let's get it out there. Let's get people talking about it. And again, this is free. This is just for those of you that are into this same kind of stuff that we're into. This is for you, our valued viewer and our valued listener.
And we should mention that, as we said previously, we are looking into a very limited print run that will probably initially just be something we give out at events. We are talking about right now going to an event, possibly this year. Of course, with the pandemic, that's always in the air. We're talking about some events right now that we might be attending. So we would have a few issues at the events, probably to raffle off or maybe to give to people that we know are big supporters of the channel, because we know who you are. We know who you are. In fact, speaking to that, Mike Lombard, he says, bonjour, mon ami. Bonjour, Mike Lombard. And of course, Jane's back and says, hey, guys. But hey, we definitely want to make sure Mom gets one, right, Dave? We talked about that. So we want to make sure that some of our real supporters do get a physical copy. So we're going to look into that. We're going to look into those options. Bobby says it looks amazing. Bobby Chambers, you're one of those loyal viewers that we are very aware of. So we're looking into those options for you guys, okay? Because we want to get some physical copies out there, because I just think it's fun. Everybody knows I'm a physical guy, right? Everybody knows that.
Right.
I'm the physical comic book guy. So I don't like downloads, you know what I mean? But I do like this. I just want to say that, Dave, that I think, because I've been with you through this entire process, I've gotten the updates constantly, which is awesome. That's a great part of the creative process, is to get those updates as it's happening and watch the entire project come together. And it's been awesome. It looks awesome. I'm very proud of this. I'm very proud to have the Retro Rogues name associated with it, and my name as co-publisher, Eric Alexander, associated with this as well. It's a big feather in my cap, and I'm just very proud of the work you did. I want to give a big thanks to Orville Nation and PJ. Obviously, he's our first featured creator. That's something that we want to continue with the Retro Rogues. We'll have another creator featured in the next issue, another one after that. We will always be supporting fellow content creators because we want to build a community. And PJ is all about that. That's what PJ is all about. He's a leader in the community, and we want to support that.
And then if you'll put me center screen here for just a second, just so people can see it. I do have, this is fresh off the press. This is an actual physical finished copy of the Retro Rogues fanzine. This is a full color, real deal printed. This is the real deal right here. I did get some pricing information on these from our printer, and they ran this for me as a proof of concept, and it looks absolutely amazing. The contributors, Ed Harris, James Stone, the Janimal, my mom, as well as our featured guests. We're going to try and get obviously everyone associated with the magazine a copy to start. But those of you who've been with us for a long time, who supported the show, who are always on here commenting, we want to make sure that hopefully we can try and get a copy to you guys. And then we want to have some, again, like I said, Eric's mentioned, have some at events so that we can either have them available either for a raffle or something. But it's going to be very limited. It's going to be kind of hard to get these, but they are going to be out there.
Even harder than the Occupants comic book, which is kind of an inside joke
be
with Dave and I. But anybody that's familiar with the project we worked on, that one was very exclusive. This is going to be more exclusive than the Occupants comic book.
But the thing that's going to be great about this, though, is you can go to the website and you're going to be able to download the issues and have it digitally, because it is ideally a digital publication first. So if you
really?
If you want it,
really? Well, yeah. Chris Roberts says physical media is always better.
I like physical media too, but I like digital stuff too. I've been reading a lot of comics digitally, and I have been quite enjoying a lot of stuff digitally right now. But again, just remember, if you want to go read it, you can go download it right now, and it's available for you. If you know anyone who might like it, send them the link or download it and just email them a copy. That's the thing that's really great about it. This is not restricted. This is free. Anyone who wants to read it, we want you to be able to read it. And hopefully also, too, we're going to help people learn more about PJ. We're going to help people learn more about Benjamin Glendinning. We're going to get people to see some of... Oh,
speaking
hey,
of PJ.
So
hope you enjoy it, PJ. You're the star of our first issue, so...
And just so you know, I have been constantly updating it. I was still proofreading this and trying to get this all buttoned up at still 1:30 in the a.m. This was a titanic task to get this thing pulled together. So I am still kind of making some changes because there was still a couple other typos. So I'm still kind of changing. So what happens is as I find them, I fix them, and I upload a new version. So if you got an early version, there's a newer, more improved version available right now. But seriously, please, everyone, share this, tell people about it, let them know that it exists, because the goal is for this to fill that hole in the fandom that was left when Starlog went away and Wizard Magazine went away. It's supposed to sit in that space for those of us that are into it. And this is something for us in our community and for us to all enjoy. So,
and PJ says, wow, I've been reading through the digital magazine. Many, many congrats. And he says, I don't know what to say. Such an honor. But you know what, PJ? We're the ones that are honored that you decided to be involved with this project. We really appreciate your support. You've been our biggest supporter as far as other YouTube contributors go. So we really appreciate that.
So, so again, it's available now. Please go download it, read it. And I am already lining up contributors for the next edition. If you are in the Retro Rogues gallery, if you're in our community, and if you want to contribute something for the magazine, pitch me an idea. The direct messages are open. You can direct message me on Facebook. You can direct message me on Twitter. You can get in contact with Eric as well. We're going to have something for specifically listeners and viewers, a specific column for them. But in addition to that, if you have an idea for the magazine, pitch it. I want to hear it. because we're looking for the content for the next edition. Just so you know, I have been talking to a trading card publisher about possibly doing a story for the next one. Ed Harris is also tentatively agreed to actually do one for each issue. Doctor Strange, unfortunately, couldn't be in this particular issue, but I'm hoping he will show up for the next one. I in the process of talking to several different people about our next artist spotlight. There's just a lot of cool things going on, and I'm actually talking to a very good friend of mine about actually writing a very interesting Trek piece, and he's already created an amazing piece of art to hopefully go along with it. So there is some interesting stuff going on for the next one. Oh, and James Stone is coming back. He's got something special he's cooked up for the next one. And again, I'm going to have a lot of stuff in there about Miracle Man. I love Miracle Man, and we're going to be talking a lot about that fantastic character too. So we've got a lot of great stuff coming up for the next one. But if you have an idea for the Retro Rogues fanzine, please pitch it to us. We want to hear it.
I really want to emphasize that we have discussed the idea of a fan spotlight. I really want to do that. I think that would be awesome to have one of our viewers or listeners talk about their fandom. If you're a big Star Wars collector, or if you're a big, whatever collector, or you're, a big reader, whatever your fandom is, I would love to have a fan spotlight and also some fan art. I think would be a lot of fun too. So if any of you are artistic or anything like that, and you have your own fan art or something like that, I think that would be a lot of fun. Those are just two things right off the bat. PJ has a question. He says, I want to review your first issue on my channel. Can I show images on our YouTube stream? I would say absolutely yes. What about you, Dave?
Yes.
I'm totally on board with that.
Yes, feel free.
He wants to review all of our issues.
That would be great.
On our channel. So that would be great, PJ. We would really appreciate it. I mean, that's the name of the game. That's why we're doing this. It's all about publicity. It's all about getting the Retro Rogues brand out. So
but in
appreciate
addition,
anything.
Yes. And in addition to, again, we're hoping to just build kind of a fun community. So please, PJ, tell people about it, show them, let them know it's out there. If they want to, check it out and read it, feel free. We have probably more comic book superhero stuff heavy in this particular issue, and I'm going to specifically push the next issue to feature more, science fiction type stuff. Miracle Man has a very heavy science fiction angle to it. So hopefully the next one's going to be more science fiction based. This one was very superhero heavy. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes with the next one. And I'm also going to do some interesting deep dives into runs of comics that I've talked about on the show, but some people might be too terribly familiar with. Like, for example, a lot of the Adventure Line comics from back in the 80s. I want to get into a lot of that interesting stuff that people maybe have not read, and maybe introduce them to a lot of this material, because I still think it's interesting and worthwhile to discuss. Cool.
And PJ says, just reviewing such great content. It's going to be fun. We agree with you, PJ. It's going to be fun.
Well, I'm very glad that you like it, and thank you for being part of the first issue, and thank you to all of our contributors for being part of the first issue. This would not have been possible without all the hard work that everyone has put into this. So definitely, let's get the word out. Let's share it. Let's let people know that it's out there, and hopefully people will enjoy it. And it's kind of a fun thing, every quarter, you're going to be able to have this fun sort of Starlog wizard type magazine, and it's going to be available there for us to enjoy. So, I think that's really cool.
And it's free, everybody. Free. So.
Yep. And it's quality too. That's the thing I love about it too. And there's no catch. I love that too. There's no catch. You don't have to do anything weird. All you gotta do is go to the website and download it. That's it. You don't have to sign up for anything if you don't want to. You don't have to give us any information you don't want to. You don't have to do any of that nonsense. And the best thing about it is too, there's only one ad in this entire thing, and it's for our podcast, the fun special series that we're going to be doing. And it's got original brand new art with it, but other than that, that's it. It's just it's I don't know. I think it's really cool. I would have been totally about this. So if I were just seeing it and everything, oh, this is cool. So
No, it definitely has that Starlog vibe, and I think that's absolutely what you were going for. So that's awesome.
very cool. Very cool. All right. So do we want to go ahead and get to our our first topic for this evening?
Yeah, that sounds good to me. Let's get going on it.
Okay. All right. So, and then I've got a graphic up if you want to share my screen. So, for the main topic today, the first topic today, we're talking about the Disney Gallery Star Wars, The Mandalorian. We're talking about the latest episode that actually came out last Friday. And it's actually all about the cast. So, it's about the various people who have been cast in the different roles and them talking about their experiences as you know, being a part of the show and their love of Star Wars. I'll be honest with you, my initial impressions was I enjoyed this one. I thought it was fun. I'm still waiting for that deep dive on the sort of technical side of how they're doing a lot of what they're doing. They're still kind of showing us stuff, but not delving too far into it. But I definitely enjoyed hearing the cast talk about how they were, how they were brought onto the show. And then their experiences while making the show, and a little bit of speculation about things they're looking forward to moving forward. So I really particularly enjoyed this episode. Tell me, Eric, what were your initial impressions about this episode of the Disney Gallery of Star Wars: The Mandalorian, the episode focusing on the cast?
Well, as you mentioned, and I think we're both in agreement on this, that I'm really looking forward to the technical aspects, particularly that back screen that we've been talking about, that back projection, which we've seen a few scenes where they show it, and it looks amazing. But they haven't got into it really to tell us how that works and how they decided to do that and all that stuff. You just see it in passing. So I believe the next episode is technology. So I'm really looking forward to that. This episode was, of course, about the cast. It focused on, I guess you would say, the main cast, which is Pedro Pascal, Gina, and Carl Weathers, right? So it focused mostly on them. One thing that I mentioned, I was a little concerned, and I felt my concerns were a little bit validated in this episode. I was concerned they wouldn't put a lot of emphasis on the other Mandalorians. They did talk about two of the other performers, stuntmen, actors, however you want to refer to them as, who do portray the Mandalorian, and basically it sounded like pretty much all the real physical scenes. One of them, who is John Wayne's grandson, if I'm not mistaken, he actually does all the gunslinging stuff, and he does like the harpoon stuff, and they talked a little bit about that. And then they also talked about the other stuntman who does most of the physical work, most of the fighting and things like that. And so in a way, I kind of felt a little bit disappointed because I wanted to see more of them, to be honest with you. I'm not trying to take away from Pedro Pascal and his performance and the fact that he does the voice. I'm one of those guys. I wonder a lot, like, when is it actually him in the suit and when is it the other guys, And that's just the way that I work. And I think that we've talked about this. This is a Star Wars fan thing. Star Wars fans are very big about who is under the mask. And Carl Weathers actually talked a lot about how difficult it is to act with somebody when they're wearing a mask, which I thought that was really interesting because I have immense respect for Carl Weathers. The man's a legend, and they say that in this episode. So they give him his due. But he does mention it's very difficult to act with somebody in a mask. And that's why I always am like, that's why I want to know who's in the mask, because it is difficult to act with a mask on. But ironically, if any of you who know your history or your theater history and the history of theater and all that kind of stuff, the Greeks, basically invented theater. They all wore masks during their performances. In fact, there's a lot of speculation that they had some sort of an amplification system within the mask that helped them to project, at the amphitheaters and things like that when they're performing. So it goes right back to the history of theater, the history of performance, the idea of wearing the mask. And it's so important in Star Wars. And they do talk about that. They do talk about that in this episode. But I was a little bit disappointed that we didn't get a little bit more about the other Mandalorians, I'll call them. What did you think about that, Dave?
Yes, I also would have liked to have had more with them actually talking about, the men in the suits, because I thought it was really cool, the idea that John Wayne's grandson is helping to bring the Mandalorian to life.
And he's the gun guy. He's the
Yeah,
gunslinger.
and that's what I thought was really crazy. All that stuff was really neat. And then when they showed him, he had a cowboy hat on and the whole thing, I was like, that's really cool. I would have liked to have seen more of them for sure. I was surprised that they spent as much time talking to Gina Carano as they did. I mean, I really like her as an actress, and everything I've seen her in, I've really enjoyed her in. You know, she typically plays obviously a more physical role, given the fact that she's like an actual real fighter, you know, a former real fighter. You know, like she was really great in Deadpool, and I loved her in Haywire. Haywire was amazing. I remember seeing the first trailer for Haywire going, who is this? Because she just so explosive and powerful and fun to watch.
See, I've never seen Haywire, so I'm not familiar with that performance. I have seen Deadpool, but I haven't seen Haywire.
Haywire's a Steven Soderbergh film, and she's the main star in it. And it's kind of it kind of reminds me of Jason Bourne in a lot of ways, or the Bourne movies if you're familiar with those. But Haywire is really interesting, and physically, just watching her work, she is impressive. She was who I wanted to play Wonder Woman. I made no arm. Yep, that's right. She was a full-on MMA fighter. That's what Chris Roberts just said. She was the real deal.
I guess Mike Lombard is a fan of the film.
Yeah. Damn good movie.
Damn good movie.
I agree. It's really good. Haywire is cool. So yeah, I would recommend if you enjoyed her on The Mandalorian and you want to know more, you want to see more of Gina Carano. Obviously, I think most people have seen Deadpool, but I think a lot of people have not seen Haywire. Search out the film Haywire. It's pretty amazing. I just enjoyed that they spent as much time with her as they did. I knew a little bit about her. I didn't know that much about her. So it's interesting hearing her talk and talk a little bit about process and as far as she's concerned. And it was great hearing them talk with Carl Weathers. And Carl Weathers, he just has so much presence and he's just done so many amazing things as an actor. So it was really cool. I really kind of enjoyed this episode. I'm very much looking forward to the more technical aspects. I'm a process junkie and I do a lot of stuff with CGI and stuff and a lot of the different things I create, except for that new story that's in the magazine. There's no CGI in that at all. That was just all done by hand. No, I mean, I really enjoyed this episode. I didn't know if I'd enjoyed as much as I did, but I had a lot of fun with it. So,
did you feel like you got any new insight into the show or anything like that?
I don't know that I got any new insight, to be honest. I did find it did help me to connect with the actors and who are playing the different roles. And I mean, I liked all of them before, so I think I just like them a little bit more. You know what I mean? Because you see them more as just how they are normally. But no, I don't think I got a lot of great insight. Now, a lot of the casting news that's been coming out for season 2, that kind of gave me some insight into what they might be getting ready to do. But no, I just enjoyed it. I just genuinely enjoyed it. If you've got a Disney Plus subscription, if you enjoyed The Mandalorian, watch this Disney Galley Mandalorian stuff. It's kind of fun. I just genuinely have been enjoying them. So.
Chris Roberts says in regards to Gina, he says she thankfully is also one of the few who have come from the world of professional fighting into acting and have been absolutely amazing in that transition. And Chris, you're right. There are very few MMA fighters that have made that transition. I think of kind of Ronda Rousey as I don't know. Should I be that blunt and say kind of a failure in that regard? But I don't know. Some people may think that her acting is good or whatever. I was actually a big fan of Ronda Rousey, but I know that she's had some criticism about her transition into film. So I think it's difficult. It is difficult for fighters because I think what happens is a lot of them end up being like stunt people or stunt doubles or fight choreographers and things like that. And it's very rare that they're allowed to take center stage. That's kind of also what was my little bit of my issue with the way that they talked about the other performers of The Mandalorian himself, because they do kind of get pushed to the side. So it is unique that she's in that position where she gets to do the physical fighting, a lot of the physical stunt work. I'm sure she has a double as well. They didn't really say that or not, but I'm sure she does. I just had that feeling. They didn't say one way or the other whether she has a double or not. But she does a lot of the physical stuff. Like they mentioned specifically one of the scenes where she literally picked up Pedro Pascal and dragged him, and that was all her. You know what I mean? She just dragged it because she has that physicality to do that. So that was probably something that I thought was interesting. And I do like the fact that you have someone like that gets to be shown and gets to be center stage, because again, so often people in that kind of role, with that kind of background, like I said, they end up being the stunt double, they end up being the fight choreographer. They don't get to be like center stage. And so in that regard, I think that's very, very cool.
No, yeah, for sure. And like I said earlier, she was who I kind of was secretly hoping would play Wonder Woman at some point. Just because now, not the classic version of Wonder Woman, but if you look at the Darwin Cook series, it takes place in the 60s, New Frontier. I think she would make an amazing person to portray that version of Wonder Woman. She just physically, she kind of fits what Darwin Cook was doing with it, and then she had that Wonder Woman has more of a physicality that I think in a lot of the other versions that we've seen of Wonder Woman in the comics, as far as they're concerned. So I would have loved to have seen her play Wonder Woman within that context.
I'll be honest, I don't know how I feel about that, but there's some there's some different opinions when it comes to that. But I mean, I know there's a lot of people that do think she would make a great Wonder Woman. You know what I mean? She definitely has the look with the dark hair and things like that. But I don't know. I don't want to be mean. I want to keep it light and I want to keep it positive. I'm just not sure how I feel about that personally.
Well, see, have you read Darwin Cook's New Frontier?
No, I have not.
Okay. I would recommend, if you get a chance, check that out. It's really good. And that version of Wonder Woman is not the classic version of Wonder Woman. She's not an Elseworlds interpretation either. It's just if you read New Frontier, I could see her playing that version of Wonder Woman. And I think she could do a pretty good job at it. But it's a very different take on Wonder Woman. She's more the Amazon warrior more than anything else, and I think she'd be great for that. You know, she couldn't just replace Gal Gadot. You know what I mean? In the current Wonder Woman movies, that totally doesn't work. You know what I mean? But I could see her if they like what they've done with some of this other stuff. If they were to do like a DC Universe live action adaptation, of New Frontier, I think she'd be someone really great to play Wonder Woman in that particular context. So,
yeah, I hear that.
That's my opinion.
I hear that. Now, PJ says that he's feeling really good about season 2 of The Mandalorian. I would say right now I am as well. In fact, for our news briefs, I do have a little bit of Mandalorian casting news, because that seems to be becoming fast and furious. And going back a little bit, when I was talking about, I think, Ronda Rousey and everything. Oh, I'm sorry. This is Chris talking about the Mandalorian. It says, not a single trailer for season 2. And I'm already looking forward to it based on the casting news alone. And again, yes, I do actually have some casting news, because that's been coming fast and furious. But backing up, he said, no, she was a failure. And I think he's talking about Ronda Rousey when we're talking about the issue of MMA fighters that have tried to make the transition and kind of failed. But Chris does say she did pretty well as a WWE wrestler, which I think she did. I've seen a little bit of that, of her performance as a WWE wrestler, which, interestingly enough, a lot of MMA fighters have made that transition to pro wrestling, which of course is, not real fighting, it's performing. It says, as a former firefighter, I can attest to the fact it is not easy to pick someone up as dead weight and carry them. Chris, I totally understand that. He does say, I feel she's a bit too short for Wonder Woman. She's only 5'8". That's an interesting point, Chris. That is an interesting point. As far as Wonder Woman being tall, that's part of the Amazonian mystique as well. So that's interesting, although 5'8" is not exactly short for a female, but that isn't exactly, I don't know, how tall is Gal Gadot? Do you know, Dave?
I don't know. But again, I'll restate it. I just, like I said, I think she'd be really great to play the version of Wonder Woman that's in New Frontier, and if you see that physically, she would work for that particular interpretation. I think that Wonder Woman is technically taller than Superman in that particular version, but there's some camera trickery and some things that they could do. I just always felt like she would make an interesting choice for Wonder Woman. And again, but it has to be a particular project, especially at this point. Because I've seen enough of her now that I kind of have a vibe. But like I said, I think there's some interesting projects that she could actually portray Wonder Woman for, like on DC Universe.
Mike Lombard says that she's 5'10". Like Gal Gadot is 5'10".
Yeah.
So just a little bit taller.
So,
and then PJ mentions, speaking of actresses who almost became Wonder Woman, our friend actress Simone Bailey, and I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, is now a content creator in our community. And I'm aware of that, PJ. I've actually seen some of the stuff that you've done with her. And if I'm not mistaken, I think she's best known for her involvement with Stargate. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, PJ, but I am familiar with that actress and also the content that she's been doing as a YouTube creator, which of course a lot of actors have been doing that. They've been putting out YouTube shows and things like that. And then Bobby says, we need movie casting call for the magazine. This is great stuff.
All right, now let's get into that just real quick, because that is a great suggestion. Since someone's called it out, I really wanted to do a casting call section actually for Moon Knight for the Disney Plus series. And I wasn't sure how to go about it. I wasn't sure if it was sort of like we put it up to the group and people respond. But the more I thought about it, in all honesty, Eric, I think it'd be interesting for you to do that. Would you be down for that?
Like the people that I think should be in these movies?
Yeah,
that kind of thing.
Yeah, because we could do a short call, right? And we could even do it like an episode. We could do like a casting call episode. And what I could do is I could tell you who the character is, and we could put up a couple images, and you could kind of take a look and then tell me who you think would be good for that. We could take a little bit of feedback from the viewers, and then and then we could kind of cast, right? And actually have that in the magazine. So
yeah, I think that'd be fun.
Yeah,
I think that sounds like that could be a lot of fun.
It wouldn't be like a super long episode like, we do like when we do a regular Retro Rogues. It'd be a short one. You know what I mean? But I think it might be a fun kind of thing to do every once in a while. Because I think it'd be fun to do a casting call for Moon Knight. I think Moon Knight would be fun to do a casting call for.
That does sound interesting. The issue with Moon Knight, of course, is that I don't know a lot about Moon Knight. I've got to read. I've got to read the magazine, and I've got to get caught up with the recommendations you have there.
Yeah. Well, see, but like I said, what we could do too is I could put together a dossier. So it's like you're the director, and it's like you're the director of the movie, and I'm the casting director, and I could tell you kind of who the character, what the characters are like or whatever, and then we could try and figure out who we think might be good, and then the Rogues Gallery could respond and help us narrow it down. You know what I mean? I just think it might be kind of fun.
I like
to try.
it. I think I think it's a good idea. So. I definitely think it's an interesting idea because I think it's interesting. I see fans do that quite a bit where they try to do their dream casts. In fact, that's one of the articles I'm going to bring up for an upcoming announcement of a show that the fans are clamoring for somebody to be cast in it. By the way, it's a show that you've been anticipating quite a bit, which I'm sure you want to talk about the announcement. Yes. I think it would be a lot of fun. And there has been a lot of interesting casting news coming out of The Mandalorian recently. There's definitely a lot of buzz about this show. So there's a lot of stuff coming fast and furious from The Mandalorian right now. Oh, I did want to mention, I feel a little bit bad about this, but I did not realize that IG-11's voice was from the director. And I'm going to butcher his name, but I didn't realize that he voiced
Taika Waititi.
Yeah, I didn't realize that he was the voice. I'm probably like the only person that didn't know that, but I just that was like the one big insight I got from it because I didn't know that. I just didn't look the IMDb up to see who IG-11's voice was. You know what I mean? So, which by the way, I think he's probably, besides Baby Yoda, I think he's my favorite character. We talked about the fact that he had the most interesting arc of any of the characters. He actually had a full character arc. You know, a full, beginning, middle, end character arc, and I think he's going to go down as one of the most beloved droids in Star Wars history.
I could see that. And we do have a comment actually from Chris Roberts over here where he's talking about, we'd been talking about Wonder Woman, and he said that there was the failed television attempt for Wonder Woman with Adrian Palacki. She looked awesome in the part for it, but was canceled before the first episode was released. And it's interesting, too, because Adrian Palacki, of course, plays Commander Grayson in Orville, and she's got some really amazing action jobs. So, because she does quite a bit of a lot of the. It's interesting. She's usually involved in a lot of physical stuff on the Orville. Commander Grayson she does not shy away from fighting on the show, and she would have been. I thought she'd have made a good Wonder Woman. We've talked about this on the show previously, and I actually showed Chris actually on YouTube. We actually while we're discussing it, we had the Wonder Woman television series, the leaked opening credits actually for the show running while we talked about it. And you could see her doing a little bit of the stuff, but she's not afraid to throw a few punches on the Orville. And I think she would have made a great Wonder Woman. And I really like Adrian Palacki a lot.
He says she was in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. also.
Oh, okay, cool.
I didn't even realize Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was still running. I wanted to bring that up in a past episode. I didn't even know that show was still going because I guess its last season's coming up, and I didn't even know that it was still a show. So that's kind of funny. But yeah, we did talk about the Palacki Wonder Woman. We have a whole segment on that, so please, it's on my channel. I have a clip on it, and if you looked at one of our past episodes, I can't remember which one. You know what the main topics were for that episode? I can't recall off the top of my head.
I don't. But
on my YouTube, but on my YouTube, which is Base God 14 BASSGOD 14, I have that clip where it's just the clip of us talking about that. So if anybody's interested.
And you also have it broken out too, where there's different things. There's like a DC section, a Marvel section, such on and so forth. So if you go to the DC section, because Wonder Woman is a DC Comics character, you would find it, in there. So.
Yeah, that should be
very cool. So are we good here? Do we want to go ahead and move on to pop culture news?
Yeah, I just did want to mention that I am looking forward to the next episode because let's see, I've got the IMDb right in front of me. I believe all the episodes have been named now, by the way. So now we know what all the topics were because at first I think it was like the first 4 episodes or first 3 episodes. I think it was the first 4 episodes. So we've already reviewed the first episode, which was directing. The second episode was legacy. We did a review on both of those together because we got in a little bit late. Obviously, this one is on cast. The next one is technology. I'm hoping this is going to be really cool for me because I'm looking forward to this. And the next one after that is practical. Then we have visualization, score. Score should be fun. I know there's some controversy about the score, by the way, so that should be fun. And then the last one's going to be called Connections, which I don't know what that means. So we'll see what that means. But I'm looking forward to the next episode, Technology.
Very cool. Very cool. And like I said, I've been really enjoying these. So if you have a Disney Plus subscription and you're looking for something interesting to watch and you've enjoyed The Mandalorian, these are totally worth watching. They're a lot of fun. So I highly, highly recommend them. So let's go ahead and let's move over to pop culture news. I don't have the pop culture news graphic up at the moment, but we could just go ahead and just segue into it. I'll set it up real quick. And then Eric, if you don't mind, if you just start us off after I set it up, because unfortunately, a lot of you don't know. Eric knows about it, but of course our viewers don't know about it. I spent the whole week putting together all these stories, and I had it as a draft in my email box, and then I went to send it to Eric before we started show prep for this episode, and it just disappeared. So, and I know Eric's going to be talking about some of the stuff I already want to talk about, and then my other more eclectic ones, I can't remember exactly what they were, and they're gone. So we're just going to lean on Eric's tonight again. I apologize, but hopefully we'll get it fixed next week. So let me go ahead and set this up.
Yes, go ahead, Dave.
Okay, sorry.
No problem.
So the pop culture news segment, what we do is we talk about anything that's interesting happening in the world of pop culture news. Obviously, it's an interesting story that either caught my attention or Eric's attention. We bring it up and we discuss it, and we want to hear your comments from the Rogues Gallery. So please sound off as we break down these various pop culture news items. So tell me, Eric, what's up first for pop culture news?
We did have one thing that PJ wanted to address real quick, Dave, by you. So we'll go ahead and let you address that. He says, can Dave point out what original artwork of his is in the new issue?
Oh, okay. Well, let me see if I still have that pulled up. I closed it out, I think.
Well, we were showing it earlier, so you can just mention what, because we have
so
we have the footage from earlier. So
I'll flip through the print copy right here real quickly. So I did all the graphic design work for the magazine. So all the graphic design work is mine. I designed the Retro Rogues logo. I think most people know that. The two R's that look like a skull. And then the Retro Rogues name actually came from Eric. He's the one who came up with the name. Those people are curious, and I love the idea of the two R's. And then sometimes Eric and I we don't see eye to eye. We don't have the same opinion. I'll like something,
Nope.
He won't like it. So that's why the two R's are sort of, they're kind of opposite of each other because they're not always simpatico, but they have to come together to form one. You insert your combiner transformers analogy there. All right, so on the first page, the Ahsoka Tano, that's actually mine. The Mandalorian female warrior, who's actually on the contents page, I did the artwork for that. Of course, I did all the digital compositing for the artwork for PJ that's on the cover and also on the inside. It was sort of like a digitally retouched painting that I did, but then we had to do some replacement, so it's more of a photo composite right now. Let's see. So I did both of those. The Golden Age Batman and Robin pinup, I did those. Was it truly the comics' greatest world? The vigilante known as X. I did the artwork for X there with the lightning. That was a lot of fun to do. I really love the character of X. I can't wait to get into talking about that on the audio show. I'm actually going to start off by actually reading and getting into an article that was actually in Comics Scene that actually talked about the announcements of Comics Greatest World first. That'll be the first episode. So the Moon Knight art, James Stone did the pencils for that. I did the inks and the colors. So that's a collaborative effort between James Stone and myself, and I loved how it turned out, and he was very happy with it too. And we have another one coming up for the next issue. We both enjoyed that collaboration, so that was very fun. And then, let's see. The big one, I think, for most people, well, the Miracle Man on the back is mine. But I think the big one, in all honesty, is this brand new story that's in the back, the Immortal Champion story. This is all me. I was going to try and find someone to help me punch up the dialogue and do some things on it, and I had a hard time, and so I just decided just to do it all myself. So Immortal Champions is all me. The story idea, the art, the text, everything, it's all me. Which is interesting. One of my friends I sent it to early trying to get a feel if it was working or not. He told me, he said it reminded him of Flash Gordon, the 80s movie. And I was like, well, I'll take that as a compliment. so yeah.
And PJ says, boom, Dave. Dave is the genius card.
So it seems like Eric might have hung up there for half a second. And
I'm back. I'm back.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
It hung up for half a second, but I'm back.
All right. And PJ says, thanks for the walkthrough. Well, you're more than welcome, PJ. I probably contributed more to this first issue than I originally had planned to. But I don't intend the Retro Rogues to be a vehicle for me. That's not the intention at all. It's just we had some people who were going to do some stuff who unfortunately couldn't do it for whatever reason, and I kind of had some spaces I needed to fill, and so I decided it's like, well, let's do this, let's do that, and so I kind of put some extra stuff in there that I have done previously, and in addition to that, some of the pieces of the magazine some people have seen before, but a lot of people have not. I don't think a lot of people have seen that female Mandalorian piece at all, to be honest. And then for the next issue, the goal is I have some people I'm working with. Hopefully, we'll have more news about that soon. Who've reached out to me over the years that I've been kind of working with, kind of here and there. So my hope is that we won't just have just Immortal Champions in the next one. My goal is we'll have Immortal Champion, and we will have maybe another 1 or 2 additional stories in the back that are comics specific. So more sequential comics type storytelling in the back of the magazine. So yeah.
EJ says the female Mandalorian is awesome, and I actually noticed that as well. That's pretty distinctive.
Thanks.
I really like that one personally as well, and I like that style. I really like that style. So.
That was an all-out piece. Those were created as sort of submission art. When Ashley Eckstein, who's the voice of Ahsoka Tano, when she first started her universe, I had heard about it, and I thought it would be fun to contribute for that because I love designing T-shirts and stuff, and I haven't had the opportunity to do a lot of Star Wars stuff. And I thought, well, let me pull out all the stops. So I basically designed like a whole line of T-shirts featuring Ahsoka Tano and this female Mandalorian commando with catchphrases and all this other stuff. And I designed this whole big, huge package. And I actually met with Ashley Eckstein for about 30 minutes at San Diego Comic-Con when her universe was first announced. And I pitched her all these things. And no one's ever done anything with any of it. And I wasn't paid for any of it. I just did it for the heck of it because I thought it'd be fun to work on Star Wars. So I've been sitting on these illustrations for forever, and having just recently watched the finale for Clone Wars on Disney Plus, and I really enjoyed the last season of Clone Wars, I thought, well, let's put this Ahsoka Tano, let's put this female Mandalorian commando in there. And those pieces at the time represented the epitome of what I could do. I didn't spare anything in those. Those were painstakingly digitally painted, and there was a lot of time and effort that went into those. I'm glad to see that people like and appreciate them. So thank you.
Yeah, they're very, very cool. Very cool. So unfortunately, with pop culture news, I've got 2 very sad stories to begin with. But unfortunately, these things have to be said when prominent people pass away. I think it's important that we recognize them, especially if they had some sort of impact on us, or we've worked with them or met them or anything like that. And so the first person I'm going to start out with tonight was really kind of a shock to me. And Dave, you've never actually met this person specifically, but he should be regarded as a friend of the show. This is Fred from Starfleet Underground. For those not aware, there's a podcast called Starfleet Underground that I participated in when the Picard series first started. And prior to that, one of the contributors to Starfleet Underground, Heather Ferris, you can see in this picture, she's in the Mirror Universe style picture there. Heather Ferris, she actually was on our show, and she helped us with our first, we did a preview episode before Picard came out. We did a promo, and she came on, and her topic was Seven. She talked about Seven. Well, Fred is also a contributor for Starfleet Underground. There's 4 hosts for Starfleet Underground, including Heather and Fred. And unfortunately, Fred passed away this week, and it was a shock to me. I do not know the circumstances of what happened, but I did want to recognize him because I did work with him. There is an episode available of Starfleet Underground where I interact with Fred along with Heather and the rest of the cast. So I just wanted to acknowledge him. Rest in peace, Fred. I appreciated being on your show. And again, I don't know the circumstances, but I definitely hope that Well, I just hope that he'll be remembered fondly, as I'm sure he will be, as a prominent member of the Star Trek fan community, and also as a host for Starfleet Underground. And then, as I mentioned, unfortunately, I have one more of these, which I thought was I was taken aback a little bit by it, because I didn't know there was anything going on with him. But for anyone who was a fan of Leave It to Beaver, Ken Osmond, who played Eddie Haskell, and so many of us grew up on this show. I know there's so many of us that grew up watching Leave It to Beaver and really loved the show. And he died at 76 years old. This is an article from People magazine. You can see a picture of him in there. And one thing that people don't know about Ken Osmond that I think is really important to say is that he was a police hero. He was actually shot 5 times interrupting a bank robbery. He took 4 bullets in the vest and 1 hit him in the belt buckle. And he was never quite the same after that. He ended up eventually, I believe, taking a medical retirement. He was on the force about 18 years for the Los Angeles Police Department. So not only was he iconic in terms of being Eddie Haskell on Leave It to Beaver, but he was also a legit police hero. So I just wanted to acknowledge him and his passing because, again, I really grew up watching Leave It to Beaver like all the time. And I always had issues with Beaver because I thought he was a little too naive. But Eddie Haskell was a really stand-up guy. And going back to Fred, PJ said, rest in peace, Fred. Appreciate that, PJ, because I consider him definitely a member of the side of our community, as someone who is a fan and someone who was doing his own content. And it looks like PJ didn't know about Ken Osmond. He said, wow, really? So I'm sorry if you found out here, but I did want to recognize that the fact that, again, iconic television show, but more than that, he was a legit police hero.
Interesting. I didn't know that about him at all. I had no idea. I had heard about his passing, unfortunately, but I didn't realize that he had actually served on the Los Angeles Police Department. I had no idea.
And he was also served in the reserves, I believe in the Army. So he was also a veteran. In fact, in this article, It talks about how he used to hang out at the American Legion. That was like his big hangout. He would hang out at the American Legion quite a bit. So,
wow. Interesting.
Really interesting guy.
So yeah, I think. Go ahead. Sorry.
So, did you have something else to say about Ken, or something else?
No, I was just going to say it's an. I don't know. Like I said, I didn't know that about him. It's very interesting. Yeah, that's it. I don't have anything else to say. I'm still just kind of reacting to it. I didn't know that
PJ
about it.
Says any comments about Ruby Rose. I'm not sure I know who that is. Do you know who that is, Dave?
Okay, so I assume PJ is talking about the fact this was big, huge pop culture news. Ruby Rose has basically quit Batwoman.
I didn't know that.
I think it broke this morning or yesterday. I forget exactly when it happened, but everyone's kind of in shock about Ruby Rose quitting Batwoman. There's a lot of big news. I assume you're going to bring up the Zack Snyder cut, Eric.
That was not one of mine. We can absolutely talk about it if you want to, but that was not one of mine.
Let me talk about the Ruby Rose thing. I don't have a link. I don't have anything prepared. I've read some of the stories. I was on the fence about talking about this because I know that when they originally started filming Batwoman, she did injure herself. And I know that this was probably more intense for her than I think she was prepared for. You know, whenever you step into the cowl to play one of the Batman family, okay, it brings a lot with it, okay, and yeah, it as far as I can tell, judging by the announcements, it seems like it was amicable. Everybody was okay with her leaving. I thought she was good casting. I have not watched all of the first season, but I did watch about 4 or 5 of the episodes, and I enjoyed them for the most part. And I thought that she made a good Batwoman. So I was a little stunned, a little shocked. I'd known that she'd had some difficulties, but I didn't realize it was at the point where she was really ready to basically quit the show. And so apparently it was amicable, and she is leaving the show. The show was is moving forward with a second season. So this is an amazing opportunity for an actress. I know that the producers wanted someone who could represent the I don't want to do the acronym because I can't remember all of it, but they want someone who definitely is obviously Batwoman is a lesbian character. She's always been that way in the comics, at least the current version anyway. And so they wanted to keep with that when they cast the show. They wanted someone who could actually represent that community. Of course, Ruby Rose does. And I would assume that they want someone who can actually for this season 2. But this is a tremendous opportunity for an up-and-coming actress, a tremendous opportunity because this is a fairly popular show. It's a very, very popular character amongst comic book fans and within the Batman community, of which I am obviously not only a member, but also a former creator. I've worked on Batman on multiple occasions. So I have always loved the character of Batwoman. I thought she did a good job. And I was shocked to see her suddenly leaving. But the upside of this is that for the right actress, this is a tremendous, tremendous opportunity to step into this and still kind of make it your own. Ruby Rose did some interesting stuff with it, but I don't think there's not enough room here that you couldn't carve out your own identity as Batwoman and actually usher the show into not only a season 2, but a 3 and a 4 and such on and so forth. So there's a lot of potential still with this character. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see what happens. So
yeah, I don't really have any skin in this fight. I haven't watched the show. I've thought about checking it out. The biggest reason I don't actually watch CW stuff is because I can't get it on my antenna anymore. I used to be able to get my local CW affiliate just on my antenna, and I can't get it anymore for some reason, which is CW 61 in the Phoenix metro area. So I don't know why that is, but I haven't seen this, but I am aware of it. And I do think this is kind of a shocking development that the main star of the show is leaving. And I was just kind of skimming through the article as you were talking, and it sounds like she just couldn't deal with the workload. When it came her time, she just can't do it. That's what I'm getting from it. So
well, and it is a very
this deadline article that I have up here.
Yeah, it playing one of the Batman family is very demanding. It requires a level of physicality. It's not just a matter of learning your lines and looking good, but I mean, it requires a real physicality. And I can see, I mean, you look at the people who've played this role and how much effort it takes to maintain and be able to do this. And then Chris PJ with Orville Nation says that she seemed pretty unhappy, poor girl. And I mean, like I said, I know that she hurt herself when they first started filming the show. So she might have been still dealing with pain or residual stuff from that particular injury. I don't know. But like I said, it seems like it's amicable. There's still going to be a season 2. And in a weird way, this gives the show an amazing opportunity to kind of restart, continue on, but actually restart with a new actress in the role and maybe, move in a slightly different direction. I think so. That's what I look at it as, is while this is an unfortunate turn of events, I think it's also an amazing opportunity for another actress to step into this role and help, usher it forward. I think of what happened with John Haymes Newton and Gerard Christopher, Superboy back in the 90s, the Superboy syndicated TV series. John Haymes Newton was Superboy for the first season, but then he left for some reason, and they brought Gerard Christopher on. And Gerard Christopher was more in line with the Chris Reeves interpretation of Superman, and the fans really, fell in love with his Superboy, but still that version of the, we'll say Superman because Chris Reeves is Superman. You know what I mean? That it felt more like that could be a young Chris Reeves.
I liked both of them. I was a big supporter of that show. I watched that show first run, and I was a little, because I was pretty young when that came out. I can't remember how long ago that came out, but I do remember that, and I like both of them, but I was a little shocked with the recasting. Also, the recasting of Lex Luthor. Remember that they recast him with a much older actor who is actually a pretty well known character actor. But that was a little shocking to me too. They really changed the show. That was
they did.
Related to this, I guess there's an opportunity here for people that don't like Batwoman. Well, maybe you'll like the new one. So there's always that possibility, right?
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. It's mostly this is just an opportunity for them to do something slightly different and get someone else new that's in there, since it seems like all of them were okay with Ruby Rose leaving. Like I said, I didn't think she did a bad job. I thought she was fine, but I think there's still room too for someone else to come in and really make this role their own. I don't think that there's I don't think it's impossible for someone to come in and as a recast and not do a great job with this role. And there's a lot of potential. Like I said, this has got a season 2. It's a show on CW. It's there's a lot of potential there. It's a great character. Batwoman's a great character. I've read quite a few Batwoman comics. I quite like the character. So,
Chris Roberts says, I had such high hopes for the Batwoman. And, we'll see, Chris. We'll see what happens. Yeah. You never know. This could end up being the best thing for the show. It could destroy the show. It's going to be one or the other. You know what I mean? There probably won't be much middle with this one. But along those same lines, because we are talking about casting and recasting and all that kind of stuff, I did come across some additional news about The Mandalorian Season 2. There's been casting announcements going fast and furious. We talked about the Bo-Katan, Katie Sackhoff, being announced that she's going to be involved in the live action, in the Mandalorian. And so it says, this is a Gizmodo article from yesterday. And it says, well, the Mandalorian Boba Fett situation might have just gotten a whole lot more interesting. And so what we have here is the Mandalorian second season already has enough interesting things going on. Baby Yoda, Saber's Dark, before it started heaping on the prospects of bringing back a few familiar faces, including the seemingly ominous return of Boba Fett. But a new report suggests things aren't quite going to go the way many people have expected. Last week, The Hollywood Reporter got word that Deadwood and Justified icon Timothy Olyphant, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering his name, Olyphant, had joined the cast of The Mandalorian second season, but the trade was uncertain about just who he would be playing. Now, it looks like iFilm is reporting that the character will wear Boba Fett's armor this season, but will not be Boba Fett. It's a weird situation, but it could mean that he is playing a familiar character from Star Wars canon. It's potentially he's playing a character named Cobb Vanth. I have no familiarity with this character whatsoever. And it says, a character you may not have heard of, but has very important connotations to the story of Boba Fett in the rebooted canon of the galaxy far, far away. It says, in Chuck Wendig's trilogy of novels, Star Wars Aftermath, which, by the way, I'm just going to say it, I've heard it's horrible. This is from a big Star Wars fan that did not like Star Wars Aftermath. I'm just going to put that out there. Vanth makes a minor appearance in side chapters woven throughout the first novel as a lawman on Tatooine. Vanth, a former human slave who freed himself, procures a set of acid-stained Beskar armor from a group of Jawas that is heavily implied to be Boba Fett's. And it was discarded by the gluttonous Sarlacc after it seemingly munched him to death in Return of the Jedi. So I don't know, had you heard about this, Dave, or do you know anything about this character?
Okay, so let me start off by just saying this. I will watch just about anything with Timothy Olyphant in it. He's one of those actors that I have just enjoyed in everything I've seen him in. Whether you want to talk about Crazies, whether you want to talk about Deadwood, but more importantly, if you want to talk about Justified. I have talked about on this show how much I love the show Justified. If you have not seen Justified, if you're not familiar with Timothy Olyphant, if you're not really sure about what his deal is, go watch Justified. They have all the seasons available right now on Hulu, so you'll need a Hulu subscription, but they're all right there. So if you have a Hulu subscription, you can go watch Justified, and you can thank me later because it's a great show. But Timothy Oliphant is an incredible actor, and I love when he plays Western or Western influence or Western inspired characters. He embodies that sort of old style Western sort of hero slash borderline outlaw kind of personality incredibly well. So I was just excited to hear that Timothy Oliphant was going to be in Mandalorian. I didn't care who he played. I was just excited that Oliphant was going to be in the show. Now, this is kind of interesting because I've read up a little bit on this, and I had been prepared to actually talk about this on tonight's show. But like I said, my email threw my show notes away. But the thing I want to bring up is this. I haven't read any of the new Star Trek novels. But
I mean Star Wars novels, right?
Star Wars, I'm sorry. Star Wars. My bad. Sorry about that. I haven't read the new Star Wars novels. But I am, based on what I've read, I know this is a character he could play incredibly well. And I think there's something interesting with this too, because I think there's the potential that he might actually be hunting the Mandalorian, within that same context of being a lawman. And it's kind of a fun way that we could have Boba Fett versus the Mandalorian. But when the Mandalorian wins, no one's going to cry foul because it's not really Boba Fett. So
that's an interesting idea right there.
Yeah.
Now this article does go on because there were additional rumors about Boba Fett's return to the series. It says, given that THR had also previously reported that Tamora Morrison, who played Jango Fett and the clone troopers of the Grand Army of the Republic in the Star Wars prequels, would be donning the armor of his clone son in the season as well, and specifically noted that he would play Boba. It says this raises plenty of interesting questions about how Morrison's role will now play out if Oliphant's purported role turns out to be true. Will he be playing Boba Fett in flashbacks? Is Oliphant actually Vanth? Or someone like him who currently wears his armor, while the actual Boba Fett truly is digesting in that Sarlacc stomach? Or has Boba indeed survived and is now rather miffed that someone else is using his armor and his reputation in a way he may not necessarily agree with? That last premise I would be okay with. I would be okay with that last premise there. But if we're not going to get Boba, I'm upset. I'm just putting it right out there. I'm upset if we're not getting Boba.
I have a theory that we are going to get Boba Fett, but what I think Boba Fett's going to be probably mostly in flashbacks, because there's also been there's always that connection with the Ugnaught characters. What is it? I have spoken. What is it? Is it Quill?
Quill, Quill.
Yeah, Quill.
That sounds right.
That he was actually possibly on Cloud City. But here's the thing: there's so much potential depending upon how they want to do this. For example, there could have been a time in which Boba Fett and the Mandalorian actually they ran a mission together, and maybe the Mandalorian knows who Boba Fett is. There's all kinds of interesting stuff that they could do with this.
But I don't want a flashback. I'm just going to put it out there. I want Boba Fett back. I think I've said it before. I think you have to do it because there would be no Mandalorian without Boba Fett. That's why I'm so adamant that I want Boba Fett. I want Boba Fett back.
Right. Well, see, there's a lot of talk too that Tevin Morrison might actually be playing Captain Rex as well. So,
that'd be interesting. Well, I could see that because of Filoni, because it seems like he's bringing so many of his characters into this. You know what I mean? So that would be interesting. But I really want to see Boba Fett. I want Boba Fett.
See, let me just put it this way. If I was showrunner on this show, you would see Boba Fett. It would probably still be in sort of a flashback, but we'd have a version of Captain Rex, possibly in the current, you know what I mean? Like, I think there's a way to work this out where it's still kind of fun. But I do kind of like the idea that it seems like Boba Fett is back, and then it turns out it's actually this imposter, pretending to be Boba Fett. I think there's some potential there. And then depending upon how you do the flashbacks, I still think it could be kind of fun. And like I said, at the end of the day, depending on how they set it up, it gives them the opportunity to have Boba Fett, or a version of Boba Fett versus the Mandalorian, where when the Mandalorian wins, I don't think anyone's going to cry foul because it's not the real Boba Fett. And there's nothing that says that the real Boba Fett couldn't be in the story. And I do like the idea that maybe he is upset that someone's impersonating him. You never know. He and the Mandalorian could go on a mission to get his armor back. That might be kind of fun. So
Chris Roberts mentions, I don't remember the whole story, but there is a story that is two Boba Fett's. One is real and the other is fake, living off the fame of Boba. And I believe that's part of the extended universe. I believe that was a story that was, officially discarded. But we do know that the current regime does steal from the EU quite frequently, frankly. Despite what Kathleen Kennedy has said, yes, there is other source material. Yes, there are books. Yes, there are other comics, and they steal from it all the time. While at the same time, throwing it away, off as it's not canon. So I am somewhat vaguely familiar with this story, Chris. I didn't read it. I believe it's one of the old EU novels. I could be mistaken, but I do recall a story like this being promoted somewhere, in the deep recesses of my databanks. So I think that's an interesting story. Like I said, that's the scenario that I would like to see. If these rumors are true, I would like to see Boba Fett back. And like Dave mentioned, perhaps they actually go to retrieve his armor, or, this guy is just sort of pretending to be Boba, but it turns out that Boba really is around. I could go for that. I could definitely go for that. We'll just have to see which way they decide to go.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential here. And, Jon Favreau, because he comes from, and has been such an important part of the MCU and played a pivotal role there. I think he's seen where they take and they cherry pick sort of the best of the stories that have come before and still sort of are somewhat faithful and kind of honor them, but still bring something kind of new to them so that they're unique within the context of MCU, but they still harken back to something that the fans are familiar with that are excited to see. So I wouldn't be surprised if they, and I know the story that Chris is referring to, it was in one of the Star Wars novels, collection of bounty hunter stories. I can't remember which one it was.
Yeah, he says it, yes, it is an EU novel. And that sounds familiar too, Dave. I remember there was a collection of short stories about all the bounty hunters from Empire Strikes Back. And I think I even leafed through that, like in a bookstore or something like that. Like I read some of it.
Yeah, and I used to own that one, and I read it a couple times, and it was really good. So I think that that's the thing. Because of who we know is helming up the Mandalorian, because we know that they respect and they like what Lucas has set up with his universe, and that, like I said, we know that Favreau, having been a part of the MCU, has seen where they will sometimes go, this is a great idea, and this is a great idea, and if we do this, it's still faithful, but it's kind of unique, and it could be fun. So I trust that between Favreau and Filoni, that if they have an interesting idea for what to do with Boba Fett, I think it'll be cool, and I'm interested to see what they do with it.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I'm really just hoping that was Boba Fett when we saw that assassin's body, and we heard the jangle, and we saw the shadow. That's what the rumor is, and I'm just really hoping that's Boba Fett.
Yeah.
Now I do have some other casting rumor over here. It's not really a rumor. This is more of a movement, but this is something related to something you've been asking for a long time, and this is from TrekMovie.com, and it says actor Jeffrey Combs responds to fan clamor for him to play Dr. Boyce on Star Trek Strange New Worlds. So we can kind of kill two birds with one stone here. Because first of all, Dave, everybody knows you've been wanting this. What do you think about the announcement of Star Trek Strange New Worlds?
I'm very excited. I know that there's some people that are kind of concerned, but I really liked Anson Mount as Pike, and I really liked Rebecca Romaine as number one. And I really liked that redesign of the Enterprise from Discovery. I really liked it. I liked it better than what they did with the movies, the Kelvin timeline movies. And I felt like that there was so much potential. And one of my favorite comic books, Star Trek comic book series, actually is early Voyages. It was actually when Marvel Comics got the license back to produce Star Trek comics in the 90s. And they did a series, Star Trek Early Voyages. And it was all adventures with Captain Pike on board the Enterprise. And I really enjoyed that. I really liked Bruce Greenwood as when he played Captain Pike and then Admiral Pike in the new Kelvin timeline movies. I've just always kind of liked Pike. And I thought he just had a lot of potential. So I'm very, very excited for the announcement of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. And I'm also was excited to see that they're saying that they're going to try to make it more of a classic Star Trek show. At least that's what we're hearing early on. There's a lot of talk that it's going to be more optimistic, that it's also going to be episodic. A return to episodic Star Trek sounds great. So I think that Strange New Worlds has a lot of potential. Could it also be awful? Sure. But I don't want to put a lot of but I don't.
We know New Trek can be awful. We know we've already reviewed Picard, we know New Trek can be awful. But I think you're much more forgiving. I mean, I know that you in particular like Discovery Season 2 because of Pike, right? I mean, you're a fan of Discovery Season 2.
Yeah, I quite enjoyed it. And I personally am very excited for Strange New Worlds. And as we see more and we learn more, we'll get a better sense of it. But I have been holding out for this. I thought that this could be just really, really great. And I just think it's fun. So I'm excited for it. Now this rumor here that you brought up here with this about actor Jeffrey Combs playing Dr. Boyce. If he wanted to play this character, he could totally play this character.
He can play any character.
Jeffrey Combs.
He's a chameleon. He can play any character he wants. He's amazing.
And it would be fun too to have him in the show because he's got such an amazing legacy with Trek. I loved him as he was the Andorian captain. Was it Shran? In Enterprise.
Yes. I'm very hard on Enterprise. I'm very, very hard on Enterprise. But one of the things I always give Enterprise was it made Andorians cool. It really made Andorians cool. It really fleshed out the Andorians. I wish Enterprise had done more of that, less of the Vulcan stuff, because I hated a lot of the Vulcan stuff. I thought it was stupid. But the Andorian stuff was done very, very well. And this is the man who did it. This is the man who did it. And you can see a picture of him compared to the original actor. And he had a response to this clamor that people have had to cast him in Star Trek Strange New Worlds. This is apparently from a site called Andorian Soup. It says, ooh, wait a minute. You can see the two actors there side by side. But apparently there was a Reddit post, and it said, there was a thread on Reddit, and Combs said, while flattered, he pulled some cold water on the notion, saying, the chasm between what fans want and what the studios want makes the chances of it happening slim to none. Now that is a very interesting statement, because there is no doubt that Star Trek fandom is heavily, heavily divided right now. And I just think that's interesting that Jeffrey Combs' response is, the chasm between what fans want and what the studio want makes the chances of it happening slim to none. What do you think of that, Dave?
Well, here's the thing. I understand what he's saying, and we all know about the divide in the fandom. I think most of you who have actually watched the Retro Rogues know that I did not like Star Trek Picard at all. I have not rewatched a single episode of Star Trek Picard. I have no interest in rewatching an episode of Star Trek Picard. It's the first Star Trek series that when I was done with it, I was done with it. And I was glad to be done with it. I was shocked at how disappointed I was with what they did with Star Trek Picard. That being, and it's ironic, I actually started rewatching some episodes from Discovery Season 2 because I kind of wanted to, because I've been kind of bouncing back and forth. I've been watching I've been rewatching The Orville a lot. I've been watching classic Star Trek a lot, and I've actually watched a couple episodes of Discovery Season 2 that I quite enjoyed. A Distant Sound of Thunder is a great episode. or Sound of Thunder, or I forget the actual title, but it's the one where they go to Saru's planet. That episode's really interesting. But I've been rewatching a couple episodes of Star Trek Discovery, the ones that probably mostly focused on Pike, but the one with Saru was really good too. But I believe, I could be totally wrong. On this, okay? But Star Trek Strange New Worlds, because they have veered so far from classic Trek, Star Trek Strange New Worlds could be sort of, if the producers wanted, this is an opportunity to just do sort of a classic Trek show and show that they could do it and try to bring some of the fans back if they wanted. They can still introduce some new ideas. Obviously, we want to see new stories and we want them to do interesting things. But Strange New Worlds is, if they want, this is a tremendous opportunity to bring back those hardcore Trek fans and bring them back into the fold with Strange New Worlds. It presents them that opportunity. Does it mean they're going to do it? Who knows? Given what they've done so far, odds are maybe not. But there is always the glimmer of hope, and perhaps that they could use this as an opportunity to do that and bring back some of the more classic Trek fans. So my hope is that's what they're going to do with this, is lean a little bit more into classic Trek, and have a show for us too. They have shows for everyone else. Why can't we have a show that's also for those of us that love classic Trek? So that's what I'm hoping for. I mean, go ahead and sound off, Eric.
Well,
can you see my thought though, that if they wanted, they could literally have the best of both worlds. There's another Trek reference. They could have the best of both worlds. They could have Discovery and Picard, where they have something that's kind of Trek, but they break the mold. And then with Picard, they just do whatever the hell they want to do. And then with Strange New Worlds, they could give us some more classic episodic Trek show and have something for everyone.
But could they? Could they really? That's the question. Are they even capable of it? I don't trust Kurtzman. I know he's not a Star Trek fan. I hate it when he tries to pretend like he is, because he has stated that he is not. He was a Star Wars fan, just like J.J. Abrams. It's very clear that he has little or no respect for Star Trek canon. In fact, I thought the entire point of Discovery Season 3 was to completely get rid of canon so they don't have to deal with it anymore by putting the show in the future. Picard obviously had no respect for canon. I've got a lot of new Trek fatigue. I'm not interested in Discovery. I've seen a few episodes. I don't like it. I just don't like it. I don't like the show. I hated Picard. I hate it. Anybody who saw my reviews, and you can go back to them at any time, I hated Picard. And I was devastated by Picard because I love the character. And that wasn't Picard. That was Patrick Stewart's weird agenda that didn't make any sense. But I have a lot of new Trek fatigue, but I've mentioned on the show before, I am going to check out Lower Decks. There's enough I've heard about Lower Decks that I'm interested in that. And there's probably a good possibility we'll review that on the show. Dave and I haven't talked about it specifically, but there's probably a good possibility of that. So I'm going to give New Treks a try. And I'm sorry, not New Treks, because it is part of New Trek. But I'm going to give Lower Decks a try. And if I like Lower Decks, that's going to put me in a much better mood to accept Strange New Worlds. Who knows when this show is actually going to be aired? Remember, production right now is halted in Hollywood. In fact, there was an article I'm not going to bring up, but they were talking about how a lot of other countries are saying, well, come film here, because Hollywood is still closed. But the fact of the matter is, we do have Lower Decks coming on the horizon. I've heard that production has been going forward because of the unique ability of animation to go forward right now, whereas a lot of the principal photography, live action filming isn't happening right now. So hopefully Lower Decks will come out by the end of the year. And that's really going to give me a better thought, a better position of how I feel about Strange New Worlds, whether I'm going to give it a try or not, because New Trek has hurt me too many times. And so I'm giving it one more chance with Lower Decks. And then I think either I'm done or I will welcome Strange New Worlds with open arms.
Okay. Well, there you go. So if we're good with this one, I want to go ahead and bring this up just real briefly. Again, I don't have a link or anything for it, but let's go ahead and just discuss it. I haven't had a chance to get into the news articles. I think most of the viewers who are from the show know I do a lot of the show graphics and stuff, and obviously been working on the magazine. And needless to say, I'm not running a lot of sleep right now, and I have not had a chance to actually get too far in to the actual news articles themselves. However, we do need to bring up the fact that they announced today that the Zack Snyder version of Justice League, that they are going to complete it, and it is apparently going to be a part of the rollout or at some point on HBO Max. There have been a lot of fans clamoring for the Zack Snyder Justice League cut for a long time. I can't even begin to tell you how tired it was I was hearing, because I used to have a lot of different YouTube, movie, TV, genre discussion shows I used to watch and listen to, and I've pretty much stopped all of them for different reasons. There's a few, like for example, like I like the Robert Burnett's show on the Burnett Work. I still watch that one. Obviously, I love Orville Nation, and I check out what PJ's got going on. But there's a lot of it I don't watch anymore because I just got kind of tired of just some of the stuff that's been going on. But one of the things that just kept coming up is there's a whole group of people that were just like, the Snyder Cut doesn't exist. Nothing exists for the Zack Snyder version of the movie. It wasn't even finished. And then there's all this talk about why in the world would DC or Warner Brothers pour a bunch of money into an unfinished version of a film that they didn't believe in, that basically they abandoned. They would never take the money and finish the Zack Snyder version. You all are just whatever. There is no Zack Snyder cut. I can't begin to tell you how tired it was I was of listening to that. However, as we have learned today, all you need to do is be in the middle of the streaming wars and sprinkle a little coronavirus on it, and all of a sudden the idea of finishing the Zack Snyder cut of the movie and rolling it out doesn't sound like a bad idea, especially if you can use it to sell your streaming service. And I feel like in a weird way, this is sort of like this story is in between pop culture news and streaming wars, because I do feel like that with HBO Max that this is a pretty heavy salvo. Because I'm going to be honest with you, I was on the fence with HBO Max. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it or not. After hearing this, I want to see the Zack Snyder cut. I want to see it. I very, very much want to see it. And I want to see what his intention was. I don't know if I'll love it or not, but I want to see what his intention was. You know, what he started with Man of Steel, what he carried over into Batman v Superman. I want to know, what did he actually have planned to do with Justice League? So I'm very curious to see this. I'm excited and happy that they're going to finish the film so that we can all watch it. I'm curious how much of it will actually be new and how much of it would just be finished up, because there's a lot of wild, crazy rumors about stuff that was supposedly happening in Zack Snyder's version of the Justice League that may or may not turn out to be true. The stuff that they were talking about with, like, you know, the color timing and a lot of the stuff they were talking about the tone of the film, a lot of that stuff, I feel like that's probably dead on. But there was all these rumors about Green Lantern was in it and all this other stuff. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make any sense. So I'm very curious to see it and finally put everything to rest of what was his initial vision for Justice League. So we'll see what happens with this. So tell me, Eric, had you heard that they were going to be completing, quote unquote, the Snyder Cut of Justice League and rolling it out as a part of HBO Max?
The rumors have been fast and furious on Twitter. That's where I'm most active. And Twitter, there's a lot of content creators that are huge Snyder Cut people, to the point of I get sick of hearing about it. But it's the buzz has been there. And there's a huge group of fans that want this. And I personally think that this is a good move by HBO. I think we kind of touched on this before about sort of the rumor, or not even the rumor. I think it was more like, Dave, I think you were kind of just saying, I think they should put the Snyder Cut on HBO Max. And that was just like your opinion. And I think it's a great move. I really do. It's a great move, despite, whether I'll watch it or not. I mean, I'm going to give HBO Max a shot. I'm a little bit concerned about the price point and things like that. But because of the show, I'm definitely going to give it a shot. I'm sure that Dave and I might actually look into reviewing the Snyder Cut. I'm in a weird position because I feel like I'm kind of in a minority because I like Justice League and I hate Batman versus Superman, and I didn't really like Man of Steel. There were elements of Man of Steel I really liked. For instance, I liked the fact that Zod was actually kind of almost on the same side as Jor-El, but he was going down a militant path and basically saying, we have to save the planet through a coup and stuff like that, as opposed to I think Jor-El, Superman's father, who was looking more at doing this through a peaceful means and convincing people and things like that. So I thought that was a neat twist, but I hated what they did with Pa Kent. I mean, that's unforgivable to me. And I also kind of hate the whole premise of Superman being kind of like, oh, well, he's an alien, and so people will be suspicious of him. And so I've got a lot of mixed emotions. Now, I'm not a Snyder hater. I own 300. Okay, that's in my personal collection. And that is always a big compliment for me to a filmmaker or a film that I actually own it, because I don't have a very large DVD or Blu-ray collection, and I have 300 on Blu-ray. I think it's a fantastic film. I also have The Watchmen, which The Watchmen's a very controversial film because Moore, the writer for the Watchmen comic, did not support that, and so Snyder did it anyway. I think he did a good job. I enjoy the Watchmen film. I own it, so I'm not a Snyder hater. I don't like Man of Steel, and I hate Batman versus Superman. And I liked Justice League. I really liked it. I enjoyed it. I actually saw it in a packed movie theater, and people were clapping, people were laughing, and I enjoyed it. So that doesn't mean that I don't want to see the Snyder Cut, though. I compare this a lot to Superman 2, and I own the Richard Donner cut, which I imagine you probably do too, Dave, or at least you've seen it. So I kind of think that this is a similar situation, and I'm all for it, even with the controversy for me, because again, I'm not a big Man of Steel guy, and I'm definitely not a Batman versus Superman guy. But I think it's good that they're doing this. A lot of fans want to see it, and I'm curious about it myself. I'm curious about it.
So I'm one of those people. I didn't hate Batman v Superman. I think I enjoyed Batman v Superman more than Man of Steel. There was a lot of things about Man of Steel I thoroughly loved. Just that there was a lot of things about Batman v Superman that I thoroughly loved. I liked what they were trying to do with the DC universe and how they were trying to connect all the dots up. Like, for example, one of the things I really liked about Suicide Squad is I just enjoyed the fact that we saw Batman being Batman. He even had handcuffs when he took out, spoiler alert, when he took out or brought Deadshot basically to justice. And I thought it was interesting, a lot of things they were trying to do. So I'm mostly curious to see this because I would like to see what were the original intentions. What were they originally intending to do? I don't dislike the Joss Whedon Justice League movie. I own it. I own all of the DC films except for currently one. I don't own Birds of Prey. Everything else I own. Okay.
Do you own Catwoman? You own Catwoman?
Yes, I do.
Oh my goodness. I do. That needs to go straight in the fire, Dave. Straight in the fire.
I'm that weird completist person. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I've hardly watched the movie. I mean, I watched it, I think, the one time when I saw it in the movie theater and was horrified. And then I saw it I saw it on the DVD bin for like $5, and I thought maybe in time I'll appreciate what they were trying to do. I still don't appreciate it. It's just a lot of bad decisions, in my opinion. But the point being is that I very much want to see what the original intention was, and how they were going to connect all the dots. So I'm excited to see this. It will actually get me to pull the trigger on actually signing up for HBO Max. So well played, Warner Brothers. And then Chris Roberts has a comment here. It was just put up. It says, "You are not missing anything with Birds of Prey." Well, that's kind of the thing.
That's
Birds
what I've
of
heard.
Prey.
I heard it's a train wreck. I heard it's terrible.
It's the first DC inspired film that I just chose not to watch. And I love, man, I love some of those characters that are in that movie, but I don't like, Huntress is like, for example, I love, there was a really great Huntress miniseries that actually brought her into where she ended up training with the original Question Vic Sage. And it's, I think it's over there on the shelf. I can't remember the title of it. It's something Blood, because it deals with the mafia. I forget the name of it, but it's a great miniseries. I love that miniseries. I love Huntress. I have actually some original comics for Huntress signed by Joe Staton. I'm a big fan of Joe Staton, and I love Huntress. And I love Birds of Prey. My wife and I read Birds of Prey actually together. I bought the first issue and loved it, and I gave it to her, and she liked it. And we read all of the original Birds of Prey, all the minis, all the one shots in the original first series that was written by Chuck Dixon. So we love Birds of Prey in this house. But that trailer was unrecognizable to us, and we both decided to pass because it just didn't make any sense. But Birds of Prey is the only movie I've just been like, you know what, I'm good. I'm not even going to try it. But I am excited for the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League. I think it'd be interesting, and I'm very, very curious to see what Snyder's original vision was. I also own 300. I love 300. That's a great movie. And I really love Watchmen. I have two main computers I use when I create graphics and I do finishing illustration work. I have a Surface Pro where I do the bulk of my heavy lifting for illustration right now. And my Surface Pro is actually all Watchmen movie themed. So whenever I log in, the first thing I see is a really cool shot of the cast from the Watchmen film that Zack Snyder did. I love that movie. I remember being with Scott Clark at San Diego, and they had Archie, or Archimedes, the ship, Night Owl's ship. And we got to go inside and see what they were doing because it was before the show floor opened. And Scott and I, we went and actually saw that movie actually together. It's one of my fondest memories. We actually saw that movie together at the movie theater. And so I love Watchmen. I have a very big connection to it. And so I'm a Zack Snyder fan. So I want to see what his original intention was. So I'm very excited for this. So we'll see. I thought it'd be worth bringing it up. I thought the Rogues Gallery might want to chime in and talk about the Zack Snyder cut because it's such a hot button topic. But there you go. So I thought we should bring it up.
Well, Chris mentions again about Birds of Prey. He said, I decided to watch it, got a free pass even. Afterwards, felt like I should have been refunded the pass to use on anything else. But he does say, I also love the Watchmen movie, but not the series that was on this last year. And I have not seen the series. I heard it is terrible. That's just what I heard. I haven't seen it, but I do have the Watchmen movie in my collection. And there's just one word for the Watchmen as far as I'm concerned with that movie is Rorschach. Rorschach steals the show. It's all about Rorschach. That's just my opinion.
I'll be honest with you. I was surprised at how much the Watchmen helped me to sort of better appreciate Silk Spectre, because it's a character that when I read the original series, I didn't really like the abrasive nature of the Silk Spectre, whether the Golden Age version or the Bronze Age, Modern Age version that's portrayed in the original comic series by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. But Malin Ackerman and Gina Carano, what's her name? Shoot, I can't remember her name. I don't want to say the wrong name. The actress who played the Golden Age Silk Spectre played her mom. They did a very good job of winning me over and actually quite finding a new appreciation for Silk Spectre. And I love Patrick Wilson as Night Owl. Night Owl, for those who may not be familiar, Watchmen, the original Alan Moore, Dave Gibbons series, when Alan Moore was originally creating it, he wanted to use what they called the Charlton characters. There used to be a whole line from a publisher called Charlton, and they had a lot of characters. Captain Atom, Blue Beetle, Just a lot of really great characters in their catalog. And so when DC had got the rights back, Alan Moore wanted to do this sort of like dark, interesting, deconstructive story using those characters. And then Dick Giordano actually was the one who kind of put the kibosh on that and said, no, we just got these characters back. And in his mind, he was thinking like that because he had been the editor and had worked on the Charlton line of heroes. And so he didn't want to do anything with them until they had the chance to roll them out in their correct form. He said, but if you create your own thing, then you could do what you want to do and it could be interesting. So that's how the Watchmen kind of came about. So the Watchmen kind of shows us the closest thing to like a live action Blue Beetle and Night Owl. And I thought Patrick Wilson was really great as Night Owl. I guess in a weird way, I've always kind of identified with that sort of dutiful soldier hero who believes, in doing the right thing and wants to think that people are inherently good. And like, I've always identified with those kind of heroes because I feel like I kind of fall in that line. And it's sometimes to my detriment. But I thought Patrick Wilson was really great as Night Owl too.
I think it has to be mentioned, though, that Alan Moore does not support the Watchmen film.
Yeah, I know.
That cannot be understated. Even though, like I said, I like it, I own it, but I do have a great deal of respect for Alan Moore and his work. And the fact is, that's his story. And so it is a controversial film because of that, because Alan Moore doesn't like it. And as I mentioned, Rorschach's my favorite character. And one of the stories that I like about Alan Moore and the creation of that character is that originally Rorschach was going to go along with the plan. Rorschach was not going to die. And what I love is the story that he talks about that he realized after he created the character, even though he already had the story plotted, as the character came to life in his mind, he's like, Rorschach wouldn't do that. Rorschach wouldn't go along with this plan. And I think it's such a cool, a cool story about writing and the idea of you giving your characters life, and suddenly they almost start to speak to you. You know what I mean? That they have their own path, even though you as the writer had created a story. You suddenly realize this character wouldn't do that. That doesn't make sense. Which, by the way, that's the complete opposite of, say, like Star Trek Picard, where characters do things that make absolutely no sense because it's convenient for the plot. It's completely reversed. You know what I mean? Because the characters have no life. They're razor thin. Bobby Chambers mentions studios have ruined more than a few movies. I have high hopes for the Snyder Cut. So, Bobby, I hope you're right. Again, I'll say it. I'm not a big fan of Man of Steel. Hated Batman, Superman, but love 300. Love The Watchmen. I'll give it a chance.
And then Chris Roberts has the name actually for the actress I was trying to think of, Carla Gugino, Gugino, not exactly sure how to pronounce that, who actually played the Golden Age or the original Silk Spectre, the mother of the later Silk Spectre, who was played by Malin Ackerman. Both of those actresses really won me over to the various versions of the Silk Spectre. In the comics, they come off just a little bit more abrasive. And the way that they portrayed them, they just gave them a little bit more nuance, and was able to kind of bring me in and make me more interested in their story overall. Watchmen is one of those films I would love to review actually here on the show, because there's so much material. It would be fun actually to actually, do
Which
the
cut?
original.
There's like three different cuts of Watchmen. There's the theatrical. Then there's one where they actually incorporated the the Black Freighter storyline, because they have a separate short film for that. But there's a version where they actually incorporate it back into the movie. Have you heard about that or seen it?
Well, I own the director's definitive cut, where it actually takes all the material and puts it together, and it's a really long, exhaustive kind of thing. But I love it because I just love the whole Watchmen universe. And one of the things I love about it is it's so great too, because it would be fun to talk about the characters that inspired them. I love the character of Captain Atom, who is, Dr. Manhattan in the Watchmen series. I love the character of The Question, who is actually Rorschach in the Watchmen series. The material and what what Alan Moore did with all of that is just so interesting and so layered and so complex. And I've watched Watchmen so many times. I really, really like that film. And I love the attention to detail. I love the idea that it presupposes the idea that superheroes have been around since the Golden Age. And we see them kind of going from, coming from the 30s, the 40s, into the modern age. It's just really interesting what they did with that film and how faithful at times it is to the comics. I know there's some areas where it isn't, but it's so faithful to the comics. It's amazing because it feels like you're seeing it being brought to life.
The ending is the most controversial element that was changed, and I still don't know how I feel about that, to be honest with you. So
I'll be honest with you. I look at it as, the graphic novel is one thing, the movie is something else. But they're both very faithful to, the story.
But that fundamentally changes things. That fundamentally changes things in a weird way that I don't know if it really fits with everything else we saw before. That's my issue with it. So
no, if we ever review it, we could get into it. I honestly don't have a lot of problems with it. Now, it's important to understand too, people who've been with us here on the show, they understand that I'm probably a little bit more visually driven. I love like a powerful visual. And sometimes I will excuse some other things if the visual works. But at the same point too, if the story beats are dunderheaded and I don't like it, it doesn't matter how great the visual is, it's still not good.
And in Star Trek Picard, you had the worst of all possible worlds, terrible visuals and terrible story.
It just didn't work. It just didn't work at all levels. But that's the thing that's really great about Watchmen, even though they changed that, and it does change the complexity of the story a lot, because it is a pretty significant change. The visuals are so compelling, and I find the characters so interesting that whenever I watch the film, I just get sucked into it. All the actors and everyone does such a great job. I just can't get over what a good job they did, because the idea of adapting Watchmen is not a simple task to take on. That's a pretty gargantuan task, and I thought for what they had,
that was the point. That's why Alan Moore didn't support it. The entire point, he said, of making the Watchmen was to do something unique you could only do in comics, and he said that it was supposed to be unfilmable.
Well, but a percentage of Alan Moore's anger too is the fact that according to the contract he originally signed, he's supposed to eventually at some point get the rights to the Watchmen back. I don't think that's ever happening now. So a part of his anger, and rightly so, is because of the fact that he feels like that the Watchmen was taken from him. So I understand his anger, and if there was some way to support him in getting the Watchmen back, okay, yeah. But at this point, I don't think that's ever happening, especially not after Doomsday Clock. I mean, they just took the DC universe and the Watchmen universe and put them together in a way I don't know how you even begin to address that at this point. So anyhow, so I just wanted to bring up the Zack Snyder cut because I know it's kind of breaking news and it's a big thing, and I thought it'd be good to talk about it. I'm excited to see it. I want to see it. I'm very curious to see what his original intentions were with Justice League. I'm not sure if I'll love it because, like I said, there was things about Man of Steel I really didn't like. There was things about Batman and Superman I really didn't like. Overall, I enjoyed the films. But then there was also too the most recent the Joss Whedon Justice League movie. There was things I liked and things I really, really didn't like. So I'm just very curious to see what the original intention was, because it may change how I feel about some of the other stuff when you see it in context. It's like, oh, we were doing that and we were going there. Now I get it. So hopefully it'll have that kind of an epiphany for me, and it'll help me appreciate the other films more. That's what I hope. So
one can always hope, Dave. One can always hope. Yeah. Chris went back and he found out where that Boba Fett story comes from. He says, side note to the Boba Fett part of the podcast, Tales of the Bounty Hunters. That is a book that tells the original version of the backstory of Boba Fett. And I am aware of that book. Like I said, I think I even remember looking through it at a bookstore. And That sounds like a good EU book to have because, as I remember, there's a lot of short stories, and I like short stories because it doesn't take a long time to read them. I'm just lazy like that, so
Yeah,
that's definitely one to look into.
I used to own that book, and I'd read it a couple times. It had some fun stuff in there, but I needed to make room in the studio, and it was one of the books that I selected. I thought, and I decided to let it go. So cool. Do you have anything else for pop culture, or are we ready to move on to streaming wars?
One quick story, because this is a follow-up, and this is related to our next main topic before, after streaming wars. But this is a Hollywood Reporter article dated May 14th, and it says Tom Wilson reprises Back to the Future villain Biff Tannen. The character called in to a supplemental episode of Josh Gad's Reunited Apart for a surprise appearance. So if you saw the show last week, we talked about the fact that Josh Gad has been doing this web show on YouTube called Reunited Apart. The first episode was about Goonies. The second episode was about Back to the Future. And he reunited most of the principal cast, but notably absent was Thomas Wilson, who plays Biff Tannen. And a lot of fans were a little upset about that and felt that was a little, like, what's that about? There were rumors that, he's just kind of sick of Biff and he just doesn't like to talk about it anymore. But I watched this clip and it's pretty funny. So he actually calls in character. You can kind of see a picture. Well, you could have seen a picture there before the ad popped up, but he actually calls into the show and he talks to Josh Gad in character, basically as Biff Tannen, and he complains about the fact that he wasn't in, that Thomas Wilson wasn't in the actual reunion show. So it's kind of funny. And I don't know if you had a chance to check out the reunion show or this clip, Dave. Did you have a chance to check out either one of them?
No, unfortunately, I did not.
Well, this clip's only like 2 minutes, so it's like less than 3 minutes. So I highly recommend that you check it out. It's fun. I think Thomas Wilson doesn't get enough credit for his amazing portrayal of Biff. We'll get into that when we do our Rogues retrospective of Back to the Future 2 a little bit later. But I think he kind of is underrated as an actor and all that kind of stuff. So I think it's fun that he got an opportunity to come on, even though I'm not quite sure what happened with why he wasn't able to come on with the rest of the cast in the larger show. I will say I watched some of the main show with Christopher Lloyd, Leah Thompson, Michael J. Fox. There were some really fun moments where they actually redid scenes, where they actually read the lines from the scenes together. And Josh Gad even took over George McFly's role because a lot of people know the actor who portrayed him is kind of on, I don't know, for lack of a better term, he's kind of on the outs with everybody. There's a lot of controversy. We'll get into that controversy actually when we talk about Back to the Future 2, because that's probably why Kristen Glover wasn't involved with this. But it's a fun thing. The show itself was pretty fun, but I have to say this, it kind of got ruined for me because they brought J.J. Abrams into it for whatever reason, and then I had to shut it off. So I'm just going to put that out there because it was a shock to me. I don't know why he's there, but they did it. So
why?
At least Thomas Wilson. That's exactly why.
That makes no sense. Why would you involve J.J. Abrams in that?
I don't know. And it was really off-putting to me, but up to that point, it was very entertaining. But again, Thomas Wilson was omitted, but he does get to come back in this small clip, and I do recommend people watch it because it's short and it's fun. And again, Thomas Wilson does not get enough credit for his role as Biff in Back to the Future.
All right, well, there you go. That's going to be this episode's pop culture news. There's a lot of other stuff we didn't talk about enough, but I think there's a lot of stuff going on. Like, for example, I think we could talk about Strange New Worlds even more. Very excited about that. All right. So, and then also, too, we didn't even talk about it, but for those of you who like the RoboCop mention about him coming into Mortal Kombat 11, they released some gameplay trailers. My brother had been sending me some stuff, and holy cow, the gameplay trailer for Terminator versus RoboCop. That's worth watching just to watch.
Oh wow!
For
I haven't
those
seen
who
it.
actually, for those who actually read the RoboCop versus Terminator comic book series published by Dark Horse, there's actually a callback to that in their gameplay trailer. It's pretty amazing because RoboCop seems to remember RoboCop, like the Terminator, but the Terminator doesn't remember RoboCop. And then they start their fighting or whatever, and it's pretty friggin' amazing. I'm very excited about this Mortal Kombat game. It looks really, really good. So if you're on the internet, go to YouTube, do a search for MK11 RoboCop versus Terminator. I'd love to show it here on the show, but it's way too gory and bloody. Otherwise, who would? Even though this is not a show for kids, it's a bit intense. But for those of you who are adults who grew up with RoboCop and Terminator, those of you who love the RoboCop versus Terminator comic series from back in the day, this is like a dream come true. This is like a dream. I can't wait to get this game. I'm pretty sure my brother and I over the internet will beat the living tar out of each other so many times, trading off who's RoboCop and who's Terminator. It's not even going to be funny. So it looks like it's going to be pretty darn cool.
That sounds like a lot of fun, and I haven't seen the trailer, so I need to check that out. We can probably talk about that more on our next episode because it's fun to talk about.
It's awesome. I'm so excited about Mortal Kombat 11 with RoboCop in it. And I'd heard about the Terminator thing, and I'd seen the images, and I was like, "Oh, okay." But after watching the gameplay trailer and realizing that you can actually fight them, and then the fact that beginning of the combat, RoboCop's like talking like he remembers him, and the Terminator doesn't. I was like, "What? That's pretty cool." So
very cool.
Yeah, I think it could be pretty neat. So awesome. So are we good to segue over to Streaming Wars?
Yes, I just wanted to recognize Chris found the specific story he was talking about. I assume this is the Boba Fett story where someone's impersonating him. And it says it's Boba Fett, Twin Engines of Destruction. And it was a comic book. That might be something interesting to review in the future, Dave.
Very cool. That sounds interesting. I'd be down for that. Sorry, I was prepping the show graphics. So, cool. All right, so we're going to segue into the Streaming Wars. So I'll just set it up real quick. So on the Streaming Wars, we talk about anything interesting that's happening in the world of live or obviously video streaming. It could be any one of the services a lot of us are subscribed to, whether you want to talk about Netflix or Hulu, whether you want to talk about the Peacock, whenever that decides to show up, whether you want to talk about Apple Plus, if anyone is even doing that anymore. Anyhow, the point is, we talk about anything interesting that's happened in the world of the Streaming Wars that has caught our attention. Again, my apologies. I've been really, really busy. I had a bunch of stuff for pop culture, but got deleted, and I don't have anything for Streaming Wars. But next episode, I promise things will be back to normal. So tell me, Eric, what do you have up first here for this episode's segment of the Streaming Wars?
I've got two articles. The first one I actually wanted to talk about in an earlier episode, but I found an updated article about this that I thought was interesting. And I'm guessing you're aware of this, but I'm not sure, Dave. So this is from Yahoo Finance, and it said, what Disney $75 million bet on Hamilton means for the streaming wars. It says the film version of Broadway's smash hit Hamilton is heading exclusively to Disney Plus for one hefty price tag. The platform's parent company reportedly paid $75 million for the global rights to the Tony Award-winning musical as streamers scramble for content amid coronavirus production shutdowns. The film will officially drop on the platform July 3rd and is expected to attract quite the audience, with lockdown orders expected to remain in effect in major cities, or major parts, I should say, of the U.S. Additionally, with Broadway's shutdown extended through Labor Day, not to mention Hamilton's already sky-high ticket price, this could be the one chance for some fans to experience it. Now, interestingly enough, this movie was supposed to be a theatrical release. And we've talked about this, Dave. You've specifically talked about this, where Disney Plus is making the decision to take some of these films they already have in the can and put them on Disney Plus. I think it's a gamble, and it's an interesting one. Did you have any thoughts about this?
Well, here's the thing. I enjoy a good musical. But it's not necessarily my cup of tea. So this is, at the end of the day, I mean, I might watch it, because my wife may want to watch it, or we may hear about it from someone else. Oh, you got to watch it, and we may end up watching it. But Hamilton is just, I don't know. I know it's amazing, but I don't really know much about it. So when it drops on the streaming service, I may watch it. I do think the idea of this could be great. But again, I feel like we're at the point now where we're so far in what's happening, with the pandemic and everything. I feel like a lot of these moves would have been better played earlier. So we'll just have to see as far as how this affects Disney Plus, how big this is or whatever. We've seen examples of this. For example, the Trolls 2 made a lot of money. I know that Scoop movie did really well because I was close to pulling the trigger just because Blue Falcon and Dynamite was in it. And I know a lot of people watched it because I saw people commenting about it on Facebook. And the price point was such that you might as well just go ahead and buy and own the movie versus rent it, because what the price point was to actually see the film. So I know that there's a play here, and I know that we've talked before that Disney Plus needs more content. So this to me sounds like a good move within reason. But the play for me, still as a genre fan, is put New Mutants out where you can watch it. That's what I wanted. Disney, you're not listening. I didn't want to watch Hamilton. I want to watch a stupid New Mutants movie. So, but I'm sure this will be interesting. So we'll have to see. I mean, are you familiar with Hamilton? Have you seen it? Are you one of those people that's into this musical, Eric?
I'm familiar with the Founding Father, but as far as the musical, I haven't seen it. My daughter really likes a lot of the songs, and she's totally into it. So she's really excited about this. When I told her this was happening, she was really excited. So it's going to be the first opportunity, hopefully, for me to see this, and hopefully I'll be able to watch it with my daughter and see what I think. Because I haven't been to New York in a long time, and so I have not had the opportunity to watch this on Broadway. But I find it interesting that this movie was scheduled to come out October 2021. And of course, what's been happening is so many films scheduled for, the future, they're pushing them back. And in this case, they're advancing it very quickly to Disney Plus. So this is a bold move. I think this is a very bold move by Disney to say, you know what, we are going to invest in Disney Plus. This is our one big money maker right now. The only thing they really have right now besides this is Shanghai Disney, because everything else is just shut down. So this is a very bold move by Disney to say, we're going to take this movie that was meant for theatrical release. We're going to release it way early, over a year in advance. And right during the 4th of July weekend, which is also good marketing because this is a movie that's related to one of our founding fathers. And so it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, because obviously Disney Plus is trying to invest in themselves. And we've talked about the content problem on Disney Plus, which has been, exacerbated by the pandemic. It's been amplified, to 11 because of the pandemic, because they had content issues before the shutdowns. They had a lot of content issues. So this to me is a bold move, and it'll be interesting to see if it pays off for Disney or not. I think it will, because Hamilton's very popular. Hamilton's a very popular musical.
Well, and along these lines, sort of along these lines, that's what I was talking before when I was talking about the Zack Snyder Justice League cut. That to me, in a sense, is almost kind of like a streaming wars play, because when you think about it, Warner Brothers needs to make some money. They want to have a nice rollout for HBO Max. They want to show people there's going to be great content on there. They want them to subscribe. And the Zack Snyder cut of the Justice League is a great way to do that, because kind of like Hamilton, it has a built-in audience. It has people who want to see it who maybe haven't had the chance to see it, you know, even though it's different circumstances. You see what I'm saying there. There are people that want to see it that can't see it. And it's a $20, not $20, $20 million, $20, a $20 million investment that they're putting into finishing the Zack Snyder cut. So when you look at it, that's probably not a bad investment, you know. When you look at the fervor for it, the built-in audience for it, the cachet, the recognition of those characters, the fact that it's going to be on HBO Max, like that's 20 million. That's not a bad investment for, I think, what they're going to be able to get out of it when you look at it in terms of publicity and excitement and people talking about and getting excited for HBO Max because the Zack Snyder cut is going to be on there. To me, it sounds like just a great idea and a great play. So I think we kind of see here how everyone's trying to do similar things to find that interesting content that people are clamoring that they want to see, that they can't see, and just finding interesting ways for people to be able to have the opportunity to experience it or see it. So I think that's all kind of cool. So we'll see. But I feel like in a similar vein, I feel like that's what, you know, HBO Max's gamble on the Zack Snyder Justice League cut is. And the fun thing about that too, when you think about it, is that the movie theaters can't get too mad because they had the Justice League movie and it underperformed. So I don't think they're going to get too upset that they don't get the Zack Snyder cut, you know? So it's kind of a win-win. So, I mean, do you think that too, Eric? Do you think that sort of the Zack Snyder Justice League cut is a similar kind of play?
It's very similar. But I think the Snyder cut is a no-brainer. You know what I mean? Like, in my opinion, because right now you can still edit movies. That's still happening. You know, that hasn't been shut down. What's been shut down is principal photography. I saw an article talking about Lower Decks, and that Lower Decks isn't feeling like they're kind of in a unique position because animation can still go forward right now, whereas a lot of the live action stuff is completely shut down. In Hollywood, it's totally shut down. So you actually have to go overseas, you know, places like New Zealand that are back open. And even I saw a thing about Poland's opening up for filming again. But Hollywood's completely shut down for live action filming. So the Zack Snyder cut, to me, relates to this story very well. But that's a no-brainer move, in my opinion. In my humble opinion, that's a no-brainer move. That's just an obvious thing to do. This, to me, is more bold because this was meant to have a theatrical release well beyond what we all hope will be the scale of the pandemic, that it was kind of out of that range. Again, we hope, because we don't know. So there is a certain gamble there as well, as far as whether, you know, theaters will be fully back up in October 2021. We all hope they will be, but we don't know. It's an uncertain time. So this really is a gamble, and you could see the potential that some theaters might be upset. We saw the fallout from Trolls World Tour, where, you know, basically AMC was threatening to pull all Universal movies in the future. So this is a bit more of a gamble, and I think a little bit more of a bold move.
Well, it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out. And there's a lot of interesting things being talked about. You know, I think was it last episode we talked about those rumors about that Amazon might be looking maybe to even purchase AMC. So
right, and then there's also the rumor about Netflix possibly looking at acquiring Viacom CBS.
Yep, and then the long-standing rumor about Apple purchasing or trying to somehow leverage a buyout and Disney. So
yeah, that's a big one too.
We'll see where we are. I think we're living in some ways we're living in testing, stressful times, but we're also living in interesting times too. So I'll be curious to see how this all plays out. Very cool. Okay, so what do you have next for us, Eric? In Streaming Wars.
I just have one more article for Streaming Wars. I thought this was kind of interesting because this is something I hadn't seen before. I wasn't aware that this was something that was kind of happening. This is an Indiewire article, and it says the streaming series that could keep broadcast TV afloat this fall. And you might ask yourself, why are they talking about broadcast TV in the context of the streaming wars? And it says, with Tell Me a Story and Swamp Thing, which I think you might be interested in that, Dave, if you hadn't heard about this. But Tell Me a Story and Swamp Thing headed to the CW, could streaming series help save the broadcast TV season? And this article talks about how multiple broadcast TV networks are currently looking at their streaming partners for quote unquote new content. Because while it's not exactly new, it is new for broadcast TV. And many of the big players, many of the larger channels, they have a streaming sister company. So for instance, they talk about ABC. And of course, their parent company is Walt Disney. Their streaming affiliations are Disney Plus and Hulu. So is there a potential for The Mandalorian to come to ABC? Is there a potential for High School Musical, the musical, and the series to come out on ABC? They also talk about CBS, and their parent company is Viacom. Is it possible that we might see The Good Fight, which, by the way, I'm not familiar with The Good Fight, but also Star Trek Picard? Could we see Star Trek Picard on the broadcast CBS network? There's some talk about this.
Let's not see it. Let's not see it. I don't want to watch it again.
Well, if the aim is to get more viewers, they might have a problem. But if they just want new content, quote unquote, that might be a good move. NBC parent company is, of course, Comcast. Their affiliate is Peacock. Peacock is available for Comcast subscribers. As soon as it's available for the rest of us, I plan to start checking it out. But I think as of this point, it's still only available for Comcast subscribers. But potential acquisitions there are Mad About You and Brave New World, which I don't know a lot about those shows, but those are some shows that potentially they're saying could be featured on the NBC broadcast network. And then the last thing this Indiewire article does is they give their own power ranking as of May 17, 2020, and they give Netflix the edge, which I would agree with. I think Netflix is definitely the dominant player. They are the one to beat. Everybody wants to be Netflix. Number 2, they list as Disney Plus. And I think I'm pretty much there with them that Disney Plus is well positioned, especially with Hamilton. So I kind of give the edge to Disney Plus as well as number 2 because of what they're doing with Hamilton. Surprisingly, they give number 3 to Hulu. And I don't know if I agree with that because they give number 4 to Amazon Prime. I'd probably put Amazon Prime higher than Hulu. I'm not sure if I would put Hulu even in the top 5. I'm just not sure about that. And then surprisingly, they give number 5 to HBO Max, when HBO Max hasn't even come out yet. And that might be on the strength of all this buzz with things like the Synder Cut and things like that coming out. So it's a kind of interesting position we see the different streaming platforms in right now. But Dave, backing up a little bit, what do you think about some of these shows coming to their broadcast affiliates?
Anything that takes Swamp Thing and introduces it to a larger audience, I think makes a lot of sense. Swamp Thing was really good, what I saw of it. It's a great character. And it was just a really interesting show because it was kind of psychological, but it was horror. It was really good. So I could totally see where Swamp Thing looks like a really interesting choice to take, and then fill some of these programming holes that they have with for broadcast television. A lot of these shows make a lot of sense, and then there's a lot of other things that are available that no one's talking about. Like I thought that Stargirl was supposed to be on CW, yet Stargirl actually launched either yesterday or day before yesterday on DC Universe. And then there's other shows that are available on DC Universe that are still there to tap. Doom Patrol was really good. A little mixed on Titans, but Doom Patrol could be great on, as a part of the CW as well. So, or, on another network where it could find a larger audience. There's a lot of these shows that have been kind of segregated weirdly to sort of some of the streaming services and haven't had a chance to really catch on. Swamp Thing has the potential to catch on in a big way. Doom Patrol has the potential to catch on in a good way. Good Fight's actually a show I'm interested in actually checking out. I haven't seen any of that yet. But the teasers are really interesting. So there's a lot of cool stuff that's on some of these streaming services that people could enjoy. Picard is not one of them. But anyhow, I'm excited for this because what it does is it takes something that's really great and gives it the potential to find a broader audience. Because, you know, Swamp Thing was a production that was mired by a lot of weird stuff. Like the area in which they were filming it, they lost their tax breaks, so they just shut Swamp Thing down. And Swamp Thing was really good. It should not have just been shut down the way that it was. And there's a lot of other great shows, too, that ended kind of abruptly because of weird, boneheaded business deals. When you look at, you know, shows like Punisher. Punisher was a really good show on Netflix. I don't know if it'd be suitable for broadcast television, but, you know, Punisher was really great. And it had its run kind of cut kind of short because of a business decision, as did, obviously, Daredevil and Iron Fist and the rest of those shows. So I think that's a great idea.
Unfortunately, Netflix doesn't really have a broadcast affiliate. But if they were to acquire CBS Viacom, you might see that, which would be interesting. Although I'm sure there's some issues right now with the rights with Disney and, you know, that whole situation. But still, that's a potential situation. If Netflix was to acquire CBS Viacom, that might happen. You never know. We'll just have to see. Of course, a big part of this is how long are these productions going to still be delayed? Because that's the problem right now, is that the broadcast channels are starving for content. And right now, that content is available on their streaming affiliates. So I think this is an interesting idea. Obviously, it's already happening with Swamp Thing. So that's a go. That's going to happen. It's going to be on the CW. So we'll see if any of the broadcast networks, or the other ones, I should say, because CW is doing this. We should see. It'll be interesting to see if any of the other broadcast networks decide to delve into that streaming library of their streaming affiliate and put some of that content out there. I think it would be a good move. I really do. And I like it too, because I'm a big advocate of free TV. I have an antenna. I don't have cable. So I would think it would be kind of nice to have some of this streaming content available on broadcast television. I thought it was weird that Star Trek Picard didn't have its pilot on CBS, because Discovery did. And I thought that was really strange. I thought that was an odd move. And maybe that has something to do with just how bad the show is. I don't know. But, you know, that's just speculation on my part. But, you know, that I thought it was kind of a weird move. I think they should have at least put the premiere on the broadcast network to get buzz and all that kind of stuff, and then hook people in to getting CBS All Access. From a business standpoint, that seems to make sense to me. But maybe it didn't work for Discovery. Maybe that's the bottom line. Like, for Discovery, they didn't feel like it really helped them. I don't know. That's pure speculation on my part.
Well, I'll just say this: I didn't care for the very first, the premiere episode of Discovery. There was some things I liked about it and some things I didn't like about it. I'm obviously a fan of season 2 more than season 1, but I think the reason they didn't with Picard, I mean, I could be wrong, but Picard didn't have any real. Picard, at the end of the day, to me, wasn't really much of a Star Trek show. And at least Discovery had the trappings of a classic Star Trek show, even though it wasn't one. You know what I mean? In terms of they
No, I do know what you mean, because at least Discovery, it's a Starfleet crew on a Starfleet ship, as opposed to the motley crew BS that Picard is. Yeah. You know what I mean? So
it had a big epic space battle. You know, it had Michelle Yeoh in there, who's a well-known actress. I mean, you know, I could understand with this, the premiere of Discovery, you know, and them hoping it would hook people to come over to CBS All Access. And I still have my subscription in CBS All Access. But with Picard, I just feel like Picard was they went so far out of their way to not have Picard be a classic or whatever Star Trek show. In a weird sense, to me, it made sense that they didn't put it on, you know, broadcast television, because it just wasn't really a Star Trek show at all anymore in my mind. It was something else.
Yeah, I agree with you.
It wasn't good.
So, but I do think it's interesting. I think that the idea of taking some of the streaming content, again, because I'm an advocate of free TV, ad-based television, we're promoters also of those ad-based streaming services like Tubi like Crackle. That's why we've been doing the quarantine stream specials to showcase content that you can find for free. And that goes for the broadcast networks as well. We did a review of Battlestar Galactica in large part because it was coming back to broadcast TV on Comet, which, I watch Comet. So these are good moves. And I think that in some ways they're no-brainer moves. But we'll see if that actually happens, because the gamble there is, are they taking away the premium nature of the streaming service by putting these shows on the broadcast channel? So that is a gamble.
Yeah, but with for example, like Swamp Thing, I don't think they are, because Swamp Thing is still technically canceled. There is no more Swamp Thing.
But they could put that on. But they could put that on HBO Max.
Right? Yeah, they could put
that on HBO Max,
and there's rumor of it, but there's still no real. I'm not hearing they're even going to do it. I think that's all just rumor and speculation. But if they put it on to broadcast television and it catches on with an audience, and they go, "Oh, this has got potential," maybe it could show up on HBO Max. That would be really cool. That's what I'm saying, is that this creates an opportunity for some of these great shows that, for one reason or another, are finding themselves in a weird situation. It gives them the potential to maybe show that they can be that big hit. They can be that breakout thing. They can connect with people. And then hopefully the studios will invest and go, okay, well, there's potential here. Let's see what else we can do with this, because I think a season 2 of Swamp Thing makes great sense. Well,
on the other hand,
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, on the other hand, I've been an advocate of getting some of these old pilots and things like that and putting them on the streaming channels. Like we're talking earlier about the Wonder Woman pilot that never saw the light of day. Why not clean that up and put it on a streaming channel? Or even, I don't know, you could even do a broadcast show, an anthology show that just shows old pilots. That stuff is all just sitting around, could be cleaned up, and then you could actually have a show with those. I think that'd be interesting.
There's that, and that's what I was talking about previously when we were talking streaming wars. I've always talked about the potential that the streaming wars represents, and what all this, these different streaming platforms, how they could take different content and view it and use it in a different way, because it just has way more potential than what's been realized so far. We are a little behind in the comments here. Portronics Film Productions says, I think an investment in some land for a drive-in theater is the way the industry should go. Funny you should bring that up. Actually, here where I live in Prescott Valley, Arizona, the city is actually putting on a couple of drive-in movie nights. Lilo and Stitch are going to be shown one night, and A League of Their Own they're going to be shown on another night. And it sounds like a lot of fun. And we do have an actual functioning drive-in that's actually in Cottonwood, Arizona, and people have been enjoying that. And they've been showing really classic films like Raiders and Back to the Future. So there are some interesting things that are happening with that. If I'd had the money when this whole thing friggin' started and had a few more connections, I would have liked to have done that. I would have liked to have, thrown up a screen and figured it out and be, working at a drive-in right now instead of my other day job that I don't want to talk about very much, so some days I really hate. But hey,
I want to mention, Dave, Portronics Film Productions is run by my friend Matt, and he is a director of photography for a project that I've been working on for the last, year and a half, 2 years. And I'm involved with multiple projects with him, including an experimental film that we're trying to film with Shelter in Place. So we're trying to do a film without having the actors actually in the same room with each other, which is interesting and challenging. But Matt is an advocate of this idea that we should start drive-in movie theaters again. And that's been presented on this channel before by other viewers, that could we see a revival of drive-in movie theaters? There is one active drive-in in the Phoenix metro area in Glendale, Arizona, but there aren't any other ones. It's definitely something that I think is kind of interesting. I saw that in New York, they're opening up their drive-in movie theaters. Now, why they weren't open before, I don't understand. That's a weird decision on my part. I don't see why you can't have drive-in movie theaters during a pandemic as long as everybody stays in their cars. It shouldn't be a problem. That's an interesting idea. And then Chris said, I hope they can keep the Swamp Thing going the way it was on the DC streaming version. And I think that Dave agrees with you on that. That's kind of the hope that maybe it'll get picked up again. Maybe they'll be able to make new shows, or like Dave was saying, maybe they'll be able to put it on, HBO now. So that could definitely be a possibility.
And along those lines too, one of the things that made the Swamp Thing show so interesting was all the other characters they were bringing into it. Whether you want to talk about Madame Xanadu, even though it was a different interpretation, or you want to talk about Blue Devil. I mean, I never in a million years imagined I'd be watching a show that had the Blue Devil in it. So it was very interesting what they were doing, and I think it has the Swamp Thing show has tremendous potential. I mean, especially when you talk about pulling from great comics and finding great content to pull from. We were talking earlier about the work of Alan Moore. We were talking about Watchmen. I was talking about how the next episode of the Retro Rogues fanzine, I plan to do a deep dive into Miracle Man. Those are all Alan Moore material, and there's so much great material for Swamp Thing that was actually written by Alan Moore. Alan Moore actually made the name for himself, a big name for himself with the work that he was doing with Swamp Thing. So Swamp Thing's got all kinds of potential. So I would definitely love to see them to continue to move forward. And it might be one of those things they continue, if it's popular enough, they might create more stuff for the DC streaming service, and then eventually it migrates over to television. So that would be kind of cool if the broadcast television could help keep it alive. And then maybe it starts on the streaming service and then segues over. And then Chris Roberts, it looks like there was some talk about Mad About You, the old 90s show. He says Mad About You is the old 90s show. I'm familiar with Mad About You. I was not terribly mad about it, but I know some people quite liked it. And then he also mentions that it starred Paul Reiser and Helen Hunt.
Now, what we're talking about here from the article that I was referencing is the revival. There's a revival on a streaming service called Spectrum, and that's affiliated. I can't remember from the article, which I believe that's NBC. They're affiliated with one of the broadcast channels, and that's why that came up. I went and checked that while we were talking and everything like that. So there's a revival series, and that's what they're talking about putting on one of the broadcast channels, or at least what this article was speculating as far as something they might do.
Yeah, and I've seen interview shows actually with fairly recent interview shows with Paul Reiser and Helen Hunt, and they've talked about the remake of Mad About You. I was familiar with it. It's just not really something that's for me. And then my mom makes a comment that I need to do a Swamp Thing sketch card. Okay, I love drawing Swamp Thing. I wouldn't see why not to do that.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, so I guess we'll give it a shot. We'll see. And then Chris Roberts mentions that there used to be a drive-in in Prescott also, and it closed up in the 80s. I've heard many stories about that, Chris, actually having lived in the area here quite some time. A lot of people think quite fondly on that drive-in and wonder why. I guess the space is still kind of available. They could actually still do something with it if they really wanted.
We had a similar situation here. My local drive-in, it was on the Tempe-Scottsdale border. And I actually went there mostly as an adult. I used to go there with my children when they were too young to go to a traditional theater. That way we wouldn't disturb anybody. And it's a sad thing. And in that case, it was on tribal land, and they lost their lease. And so that one's not coming back, unfortunately.
And then my mom also mentions that there's a drive-in in Memphis. I wonder if it's the same one that my mom used to take me to when I was a kid. I remember those light fixtures very vividly. They're very 1950s, and it was lit up all the way there. Like, so you were driving along this lit up thing until you got into the movie theater. So
very cool.
The drive-in movie theater. But no, drive-ins got a lot of potential. I think that drive-ins could currently be experiencing a bit of a resurgence right now. So yeah, interesting. Very cool. We do have a few more comments talking about drive-ins, but do you have anything else for Streaming Wars? Or are we good to get into our main topic?
I'm good to go for it.
Okay. All right. So let me get the graphic up here real quick. All right, cool. And then I'll set it up here real fast. So on this segment of the show, we're going to be talking about Back to the Future Part 2. This is going to be a Rogues retrospective, or a retro retrospective, if you will. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about Back to the Future Part 2 in the context of how we originally saw it or how we originally heard about it, our thoughts about it then, and then we're going to talk about how we feel about the film today, having recently revisited it. So just real quickly here, I'm going to read just some real quick factoids about Back to the Future Part 2. I'll read the synopsis here real quick. This film is from 1989, and it says, after visiting the year 2015, Marty McFly must repeat his visit to 1955 to present disastrous changes to 1985 without interfering with his first trip. It's a very convoluted story, but I think that sums it up pretty decent. This was written by Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale. Was directed by Robert Zemeckis. Of course, it stars Michael J. Fox, Christopher Lloyd, Leah Thompson, Thomas F. Wilson, Elizabeth Shue, and a bit of a controversial recasting. We were talking about that earlier. Not really controversial, but I mentioned it that way anyway. James Tolkien, another recasting. Jeffrey Weiss as George McFly, and many other wonderful actors who are quite familiar with, one of which is, of course, the great Billy Zane, which I swear every time I watch these movies, I know he's there, but I always forget that he's in these movies until I see him. And it's like, oh, it's Billy Zane. The Phantom. The Phantom is in this movie. He is a Phantom because you forget he's in this movie and then he shows up. So he is the Phantom. So let's talk about how we first learned about Back to the Future Part 2. So I'm going to start with you, Eric. Tell us, how did you first hear about Back to the Future Part 2?
Well, this film I actually had the pleasure of seeing in the theater. We mentioned with the original Back to the Future, I did not see it in the theater. And I was way behind everybody else. All my friends had seen it. All my friends were talking about it. It was such a big deal, and I felt completely left out. And then finally, it came out on video, and then I got to see it. We mentioned, Dave, that was a common thing with the two of us. We saw it on video. And so we also saw it with the infamous "to be continued" at the end, which, of course, if you see it on Netflix, you're seeing the theatrical version, not the video version, the videotape version. So that "to be continued" isn't there, which is a little bit jarring for me. But I did see Back to the Future 2 in the theater with my dad. And because of that, it's got a special place in my heart. And I remember it was a real big deal to go see it. I was highly anticipating it. Everybody was kind of really, hyped about it, and everybody wanted to see it. I had some friends that got to see it before me, and I pretty much had them tell me all the spoilers because I didn't care. I just wanted to know. Everybody wanted to know what happened. And so it was a highly anticipated movie, and I did get to see it in the theater with my dad. And I remember loving it. Especially what's interesting to me is especially the future scenes, which really aren't that prominent in the movie, honestly. But that was the big thing that stuck out in my mind as a kid, was the flying cars, the hoverboards, all the future stuff. What about you, Dave?
Well, the first time I started thinking about the idea of a sequel for Back to the Future Part 2 is as you mentioned, was seeing it on VHS, the "to be continued." So you knew there would be a Part 2. I'm going to be honest. I don't remember how I first heard about them making a sequel to Back to the Future. It made sense. There was obviously a bit of a delay until this film actually came out. I do remember seeing the movie poster because it was very iconic and striking. I did see this one in the movie theater, and I remember that I quite enjoyed it. It was in some ways what I imagined it would be, and in other ways it wasn't. When Doc Brown makes the comment about your kids, Marty, something's got to be done about your kids. You assume somehow the kids are going to be the villain of the story, and they're not really the villain of the story. This film, I think, is probably one of the more divisive of the Back to the Future sequels, because I know a lot of people don't really care for this one too much. I think it's because it takes such a dark twist. But in that way, it kind of reminds me of Empire Strikes Back, because Empire does the same thing.
That's interesting.
It takes a dark twist, and it goes in a direction you don't really expect it to go in. And it's a little jarring and it's a little shocking. But I think that's what helps make the payoff so entertaining in part three. So I'll be honest, I'm not one of those people that hates Back to the Future Part 2. I actually quite like Back to the Future Part 2. I mean, I don't, when I hear, for example, like Star Trek fans diss on Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock, I don't understand that, because to me, 2, 3, and 4 go together. Like they go together, like they're all part of that story, and it's a wonderful journey. And I see the Back to the Future films the same way. The original Part 2 and Part 3, they go together. It's one story, So I don't, in my mind anyway, I don't break Back to the Future Part 2 off and go, oh, well, this is the lesser. I didn't back then. And my feelings haven't changed too much today. But I don't remember how I originally heard about it. I do remember seeing the poster in the movie theater. And I do remember really thoroughly enjoying it and having a lot of fun with it. And then being a little dismayed that some people did not enjoy it as much as I did. And I was a little kind of stunned by how much some people disliked the film. Because I just thought it was weird. A lot of fun. Yeah.
I didn't know anybody that disliked the film. It was, in my circles, it was universally accepted.
I know a lot of people that just skip over this movie and go right to Part 3. I wouldn't say this is my favorite of the 3 films, but I do quite enjoy it. And to me, I feel like it's integral. You obviously can't have 3 without Part 2, at least in my mind anyway. So that's how I feel about the film. That's how I first heard about it. Again, I don't remember how I first heard about it, but I do remember seeing the movie poster in the theater. That's how I heard about a lot of movies, to be honest with you. I would be getting out of one movie and I'd be walking by and like, oh, what's this? This looks cool. I'll check this out. Those movie posters sold a lot of movie tickets with me. And it's funny because nowadays they don't do the same anymore. And I think it's because I think we've lost a little bit of the art of the movie poster, in my humble opinion. So we've talked about how we first heard about the film. And then, Eric, how did you feel about watching the film for the first time?
I loved it. I thought it was amazing. Again, because I saw it when I was pretty young, I saw it in the theater when it came out. I was really impressed with the whole future thing, which, funny enough, of course, it's now their future is in our past. And of course, Our past is nowhere near as cool as this vision of the future. This vision of the future is amazing, and I really enjoyed it, and I thought they were very creative. As prophets, they were way off. Like almost 100% off. But as far as entertainment and visuals and all that, I love it. I still want my flying car. I still want my hover car. I still want my hoverboard. And by the way, I get so angry when they call those stupid little things. I don't even know what they're really supposed to be called, but you know what I'm talking about. They call them hoverboards. That's not a hoverboard. I say that to my kids all the time too. It's like, nope, it's got wheels on it. That isn't a hoverboard. I still want my hoverboard. What about you, Dave? Do you want your hoverboard?
I have some inner ear balance problems from time to time. I don't want a hoverboard. It sounds like it would be a painful experience for me. I will take a flying DeLorean though. I'll take that all day long, and twice on Sunday. I totally hear what you're saying. Their vision of the future is a lot more fun, and I think that's what we could all use now as a future with a little bit more fun. So very cool. All right. So we've talked about how we first heard about the film, and we talked about our initial impressions or how we felt about it back then. So now we're going to take a moment and we're going to talk about how we feel about the film today. So tell me, Eric, having recently revisited Back to the Future Part 2, how do you feel about the film today?
Well, I still enjoy it. I still enjoy it quite a bit. I think, for lack of a better term, it really is timeless. So, I enjoy it. Even though, obviously, it's dated. There's no doubt it's dated because their future is now our past. And as I mentioned before, our past was nothing like that. We didn't have the things that they have in that film. But still, it's an interesting idea of what the future could be. And I still cling to that idea that we could have things like that in the future, that we could have flying cars and things of that nature. So it's still, in that regard, it's funny to me how that's still what I really, 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 really like about the film is that vision of the future. But as an adult watching it, it's funny to realize how little of the film, that actually is. The future stuff is what, like maybe the first 15 minutes, if that, maybe 20 minutes. I mean, it's most of the film is not in the future. They end up going back to 1955. So it's kind of interesting in that regard that the part that really sticks out in my head and the part that I really kind of love this film for is so little of the actual film.
Yeah. So here's how I feel about the film today. So for me, I enjoy the 1950s elements where you're seeing it from a different angle. I think for me, this movie is very much about the future, their vision of the future, very much like you, Eric. But I also really love the really dark, twisted reality of 1985 because it always reminds me of the fun that they had with Mirror Mirror on Star Trek. The idea of showing us, an alternate, version gone horribly wrong. And that's one of the things I like about the sort of unfortunate, version of 1985 that they returned to, and how much things have kind of changed because of just a few, well, not a few, they're pretty major changes that Biff Tannen actually makes in the timeline, but it's just very, very interesting. And those are the elements I like about the film. I like the parts about the film a lot of people don't like about the film. I love all that dark, twisted stuff. And to get back to the actor who played Biff Tannen, he's really great in the 1985 scenes.
Can we go back to the dark part, because I didn't really talk about that, and I want to kind of get into that a little bit with you. One thing that
go ahead.
One thing that was unique for me about watching this recently is I watched it again with my daughter, because I saw the first one with my daughter, so she's seeing these movies for the first time. And I was a little worried about, especially the murder of George McFly. As a parent watching my young daughter watching that, I was like, what is she going to think about this? Because I'm thinking in this context, this is really messed up. You know what I mean? That Biff, of course, at first we don't realize Biff murdered George McFly, but still the fact that, that Marty's father was murdered, that is something that's kind of a little tough to watch with a little kid. And I saw this as a little kid.
Oh, it is kind of tough, but I do think too, by some of today's standards, it might seem a little tame. But
when you're invested in the characters, because if you've watched the first movie,
no, I know,
and Crispin Glover's portrayal of George McFly is one of the standouts in Back to the Future. And by the way, I do want to talk about that controversy a little bit, before we finish up. But he's such a big integral part of the movie, and you really feel for him, because he had, like my daughter, her favorite moment was seeing him punch Biff. That was her favorite part of the movie, because it was like, it really built up to that, where you really feel for George McFly, and that moment where he punches Biff is just, that's just crowd pleasing entertainment. Everybody wanted to see that. It literally changes the course of his life. And then to see him, murdered in the second one, I think that's rough. I'm not saying it was a bad decision or anything. I'm just saying that it definitely is a rough part of the movie, at least for me.
No, it is. It is. And like I said, a lot of people have a lot of problems with this film because of the twisted turn that the new 1985 takes because of the events that occur. Throughout.
Remember, Marty asked the doc if they're in hell. Remember, it's like we're in hell or something like that.
Yeah. But again, I sort of like all that stuff, because you're at such a far point that the journey back, to a more bright, hopeful thing, it makes it, kind of more extreme. You know what I mean? And you want to get there faster, and and you want the timeline restored, and it kind of in terms of a story element, just that idea kind of even urges you to want to push forward faster. So no, I think it quite works for all of that stuff, and it doesn't bother me at all. Revisiting it, I still like a lot of that stuff. It doesn't really, again, for some whatever reason, it doesn't bother me a lot personally.
Well, Dave, you were going to talk about Biff, and it has to be. I think it has to be talked about a little bit. What do you think about? Because you're saying that you really enjoy some of the darker tones and the contrast. Which, by the way, I agree with you. There is a great contrast between the new version of 1985 and their vision of the future. There's a great contrast there between how dark and depressing Biff's world is versus the future that they went to in the first part of the movie. There's a beautiful contrast there. But one thing that I think is interesting is the idea of Biff actually being a murderer. Because we've always thought of him as like a bully and kind of like a bad guy, but he's like evil. You know what I mean? That's kind of a twist.
Well, no, but what I said, to me, that's what makes those moments really interesting for me personally as someone who's watching the film. And then I was going to talk about the actor because I feel like he does a really good job selling you on that. I never question at any moment that Biff isn't capable of doing those things, because his performance is such that you could totally see him doing that. So to me, in terms of the story they're telling and everything, I feel like it makes sense. Is it sort of a super villain sort of version of Biff Tannen? Because he has shades of Lex Luthor, wouldn't you think?
Yes, that's a nice analogy. Moments. A dumb Lex Luthor. A Lex Luthor with no brains. Yeah.
Yeah. But he has shades of that kind of idea. That 1980s corporate raider version of Lex Luthor. He very much envisions and has kind of some of that at the core of his character. So to me, it just kind of worked because you want to see it gives the heroes an even greater adversary to overcome. And it's interesting too because just by defeating him, nothing's going to change. The stakes are so high. What they have to change is even greater than just that, so it's not like they can just stop Biff Tannen in the 80s and everything's fine. I mean, they have to do an awful lot of work to fix everything that's gone wrong. So it's a lot of fun. I think, anyway.
Chris Roberts has an interesting idea here, and I did want to talk about some of this. He says, I have a feeling that killing him off that way in regards to George McFly, killing him off that way was a way of saying F you to Crispin Glover over not wanting to be in the movie. And that is a good segue, Dave. I think we do have to talk about the controversy of recasting Crispin Glover. And, of course, it was Jeffrey Wiseman who was cast as George McFly in the second movie. And that's, of course, why he's upside down. And there is a ton of controversy about that move. Are you aware of that, Dave?
Well, I know he was recast, but I'm going to be honest with you. I don't really know much about why. They touch on it a little bit, if I remember correctly, in that Back to the Future documentary, but they don't get too far into it. But I did think it was weird that he didn't come back for this movie, but he was in 2 Charlie's Angels movies. I did find that a little bit strange.
Yeah, decisions. Actors don't always make the best decisions, and I don't know. I've heard Crispin Glover's version before. It's not fresh in my mind. He was on a podcast, and I feel like that might have been within the last year or two, not too long ago. And he kind of gave his side of things, and also talked about, for instance, nobody really questions why he wasn't on that United Apart special that I've been talking about. Everybody knows there's bad blood between him and the director and the entire production staff and all that kind of stuff. And of course, the first movie is not without controversy because Eric Stoltz was fired from the part of Marty McFly, Michael J. Fox's part, which I would still, we were talking about the Snyder Cut earlier. I kind of want to see a Eric Stoltz cut of Back to the Future. I think that would be kind of interesting. But in regards to the recasting of George McFly, I think it's interesting because I've met Jeffrey Wiseman. So I have a kind of different perspective on this because I think most people they just sort of naturally take Crispin Glover's side. And of course, there was a huge controversy because they made Jeffrey Wiseman look like Crispin Glover to the extent that Crispin Glover actually ended up in like a lawsuit that was supported by SAG in terms of using the likeness of actors when they're not in a movie. It's kind of considered like a precedent-making case. But Jeffrey Wiseman is a really interesting guy. The way that I met him was we had a local sort of like media expo in Tempe, Arizona, and he was doing like an actor's workshop for that. And he did a really good job. Jeffrey Wiseman was also in Unforgiven, and he had a lot of stories about Clint Eastwood. So it was a lot of fun to meet him and talk to him. But there's definitely a huge controversy there. And I think both actors have suffered in their careers as a result of this controversy.
Well, that's interesting. Like I said, I didn't know too much about it, other than that he was recast, because even though they try to make it kind of seamless where you don't question it, it's pretty obvious it's not the same person.
That led to a lawsuit because he was saying that they were trying to make it like that was him.
Yeah,
that was the meat of the lawsuit. And I think, like I said, there's definitely been pushback from that. I think in terms of the career, I think of both actors.
Yeah, I could see that.
Now, do you know anything about the whole deal with Leah Thompson? I'm sorry, not Leah Thompson, but with Claudia Wells and Elizabeth Shue? Because I don't know anything about that, why that happened.
No, I all I've heard is on the documentary they talk about, and they don't spend a lot of time with it, but like the producers wanted to go in a different direction. I don't know if they thought that she couldn't, like acting wise, like handle having to have that much more material, having to,
but she doesn't. She's barely in the movie. That's, you know what I mean? She's barely in this. That's one thing that stuck out to me watching this again, because I love Elizabeth Shue. Elizabeth Shue is like, ever since Karate Kid, she's another one. Like I talked about the big crush I had on Leah Thompson, which by the way started with Red Dawn. Red Dawn is what started me on Leah Thompson, and then I had a huge crush on Elizabeth Shue from Karate Kid, because Karate Kid was a big part of my growing up. I saw that movie in the theater. So I was really shocked at how little she's in this movie. She's barely in it.
Well, and that was one of the things I thought was really odd about her recasting, is the fact that she isn't in the film very much. But when you initially see her, I remember when I originally saw it, I don't think I made the connection that it was someone that was different. That's the thing that's really weird.
I didn't either. I guarantee I didn't.
I didn't immediately. All I could think of is like, well, she looks pretty different from the last movie, but I just assumed it was the same. I didn't even bother to go back and check when I first saw Back to the Future Part 2. I didn't even give it a second thought. And then, for me, Elizabeth Shue, she's been in a lot of great stuff, but for me, Karate Kid is still the be all end all. I would love to talk about the Karate Kid movies on the show. I love Karate Kid. I think a lot of people know that because a lot of my quotes, like on my DeviantArt and stuff, is it's weird. It's either a quote from the Punisher, Yoda, or Mr. Miyagi. so we're a collection of
Yoda and Mr. Miyagi make a lot of sense. The Punisher is where you kind of go a little weird, I think.
Well, I mean, I feel like Dolph Lundgren has some interesting lines in that his Punisher movie that I like to quote. When Louis Gossett Jr. is like, "What do you call however many murders in 5 years?" And he gets all kind of serious and goes, "Work in progress." I like that line, "Work in progress." So
I like that too. That's cool.
So yeah, there's a lot of fun quotable stuff from that movie. I love that movie. I know a lot of people hate it, but I love that movie. But no, Elizabeth Shue, big huge deal for me because of Karate Kid. I love Karate Kid. I'm constantly trying to explain things sometimes to coworkers, and I feel like I'm trying to be Mr. Miyagi a lot of times. No, yeah, it is weird that she doesn't have, but the only point I'm making is that I feel like she does have a little bit more to do than the other actress did, but it still doesn't make sense. But it is what it is. It's kind of an unusual thing. I don't know if their original intention was maybe they thought they were going to do more with that part, and then as they pulled the film together, it turned into something else, and they went, oh, well, I guess we didn't need to. I don't know. It never really made sense to me why they recast the other actress. But I like Elizabeth Shue enough. I didn't miss her, unfortunately for her. So no, yeah, that's kind of the weird thing. There is those two kind of recastings, and I don't know why they recast the other actress who played Jennifer. I don't know why. And I don't think they make a big deal out of it either in a lot of the things I've seen. I'm sure somewhere there's a YouTube video that breaks it down. So my apologies that I haven't seen that YouTube video yet, but I don't know why. So is there anything else that you want to talk about the film in terms of like controversy or curious things about it? Or are we good to kind of talk about how we feel about the film today here just real quick?
Yeah, I think it's good to talk about, just how we feel about it today.
Okay, cool. All right. So we do have a couple of another quote here real quick from Chris Roberts. He said, or comment, he said he kind of enjoyed that Punisher. I'm assuming he's talking about the Dolph Lundgren one, but felt the Thomas Jane version was better. Well, the Thomas Jane version is definitely more a actorly take on the Punisher. They spent a lot of time giving us the gravitas and the pain that he's obviously going through. And they up the stakes too, because in the Thomas Jane Punisher movie, spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen it, they don't just kill like, his wife and his kid. They wipe out his entire family, cousins, uncle, third cousins, that family friend who's always hanging around. Man, they killed all of them in that movie. So he's got a lot of baggage he's working through. And I quite like, to be honest with you, I like all the Punisher movies. I feel like the Ray Stevenson one, Warzone, is probably the closest to the comics. But I liked every single version of the theatrical Punisher movies for different reasons. I always apply this idea, I've brought this up before on the show, the concept of looking at it as if it's an Elseworld story, because it's easier to enjoy it for just what it is. What if the Punisher was, circumstances are slightly different and you get this version? But I like a lot about that movie. So, but we're getting way off topic. So let's get back.
Yeah, a little bit there, Dave.
A little bit off topic.
A little bit there.
So in terms of revisiting Back to the Future Part 2 today, I still thoroughly enjoy it. I still like it a lot. Like I said, I feel like it's important. Back to the Future Part 2 and Part 3, I feel like they go together in the same way that Star Trek, 2, to 4 go together. They're important. You have to have all of them for it to kind of work, in my mind. Has a lot of fun stuff. I love all the future stuff at the beginning still. Is some of it kind of dated, especially when you consider the fact that their futures in our past? Of course, it's obviously dated at times. But I still don't think it really takes away from it being a fun movie. And really great performances from all the various actors. Special effects are kind of fun. There's a few shots I don't think hold up quite as well as I remember. But this is one of those films, I do watch it probably about once every 2 or 3 years, because I do make my way through all the Back to the Future films. I don't rewatch this one as much as I rewatch, obviously, the original or even the third one. But I don't consider this film any less. The original one, the original Back to the Future, is my personal favorite of the three. But I quite enjoyed Back to the Future Part 2. I enjoyed it then, and I feel the same way about it today. I would recommend, if you have Netflix, because this is on Netflix, if you have Netflix and you're thinking about revisiting Back to the Future, I say watch all three. Watch all three. don't skip over part 2 because someone in your household thinks it's okay. Go ahead and watch it. It's an important part of the story. So tell me, Eric, how do you feel about Back to the Future Part 2 today?
I enjoy it. I think it's an enjoyable film. As I mentioned, I think it is timeless. And the one issue that I do have with it, you kind of touched on it. This film could use a remaster. The effects are a little dated, particularly the flying effects and things of that nature. Some of them actually work quite well, but some of them are a little jarring from a contemporary eye. So that would be my major criticism of the movie, is that some of the effects are a little bit dated. Some of the effects work very well, such as the hoverboard, the way that they did the hoverboard scenes and things like that. They shot them in such a way that for the most part, it's pretty seamless. But there are some other shots, particularly of the DeLorean when it's flying, and there's other issues here and there that could use some sort of a remaster. And maybe I'm a little spoiled because of the original Star Trek remasters. But that would be my only real criticism of the film. I will say that my daughter didn't have any criticisms like that. Like, she wasn't like, oh, that looked fake and that's stupid or whatever. She just enjoyed it. So that, I think, says it all right there.
Yeah, I agree. And that's, in all honesty, that's the most important thing, is that hopefully when people revisit these films, especially the films that we do the retrospective with, hopefully they'll enjoy them. I can definitely say Back to the Future Part 2 is a good film, and you won't regret watching it, especially when you watch it in conjunction with, obviously, the original one, which I consider to be a classic, and then obviously the third one, which kind of brings it all together. So very cool. We did have one other comment. Chris Roberts had commented and said that,
let's leave that.
Okay.
We need a comment
Okay.
for the end. So
all right, okay.
Let's leave that.
I didn't know you wanted to do that. So all right, cool. All right. Very cool. Are we good to go ahead and go to the outro then?
Yeah, I'm good to go.
Okay, awesome. Very cool. All right, well, I want to thank you for watching this episode of the Retro Rogues Live. Again, I've been one of your hosts. My name is Dave Beatty. You can learn more about me, see more of my art, and download the Retro Rogues fanzine today, tonight. Do it right away. Tell your friends. Share it. Let's get everyone reading this. Let's get people hopefully excited about it, looking forward to the next issue. And again, if you have ideas, I want your submission ideas. I want to see what kind of things people are interested in. The idea of doing the fan casting sounds like a great idea. I'm definitely down with that. But again, you can learn more about me, see more of my artwork, download the Retro Rogues fanzine, and also sign up for the email newsletter if you would like to do that as well. You can do that and so much more at the official Retro Rogues website, which is www.davebeatty.com. That's DAVEBEATY.com. But it's also Retro Rogues. So www.RETROROGUES. I have to work that one out. And get it more down. But we also have the Retro Rogues. You can use retrorogues.com to get to the website as well. So again, please check that out. Please download the fanzine. Send us those submissions. And please tell people about what we're doing here on the show. If you enjoy the show, help us continue to build this fan community and continue to talk about all these things that we love, all this fun genre entertainment. So I want to thank Eric Alexander, my co-host, for helping keep this whole crazy thing afloat. Please, Eric, tell the folks so they can learn more about you on the interwebs.
I'm most active on Twitter, so you can find me at BassGod14, at BASSGOD14. My DMs are always open. It's an easy way to contact me. That's also my YouTube channel. That's also my Twitch. So you can also reach out on those platforms and comments and things like that. But I'm especially interested if you folks have any interest in doing, one of these, if you would like to be featured in one of these, sort of fan focus, rogues gallery focus articles for the next e-zine, the next fanzine. I would love to hear from you, especially if you're, whatever you're into collecting, you're into movies, whatever your fandom is, it could be anything. Doctor Who, it doesn't have to be something that we have reviewed on the show. because I'm always open to new stuff. And I wanted to recognize Bob Chambers. He says, thanks for another show, gents. We thank you for being here, Bobby Chambers. And Chris Roberts helped us out earlier when we were talking about the controversy or the recasting of Jennifer in Back to the Future 2. And he says, and Claudia Wells was simply unavailable for personal reasons and was unable to be in the movie. And with that, we will leave our viewers with the last word.